Chapter 447. The light gradually dimmed, and dozens of glowing balls appeared in the sky above the manor, emitting bright light beams that intersected with each other, forming a light net, projecting a bright light curtain over the entire manor. This kind of light was similar to the light of a star, making the people in the manor feel as if they had returned from the evening to the day. Many people were already used to this kind of situation. They raised their heads to take a look and continued chatting. More than 10 humanoid robots were carrying drinks, various kinds of pastries, barbecued meat, and other food, shuttling back and forth in the crowd, looking very busy. Yang Tian looked up at the light curtain above, lowered his head, and took a sip of wine. Ever since he mentioned the establishment of the Azure Dragon family, the three of them were silent for a long time. Yang Tian was thinking about how to establish a family. Zhu Wei and Qi Guanghao wanted to hear Yang Tian's thoughts. This was a big deal, and the amount of money spent was incalculable. With the current financial resources of the Shuangjiao Group, it was still far from enough to support the establishment of a family. Yang Tian also didn't want to take money from the Shuangjiao Group. He knew that for this company that was still developing, doing so was undoubtedly killing the goose that laid the golden eggs. After a long time, Yang Tian said faintly, "Let's not worry about that for now. Let's raise the flag first." After saying that, Yang Tian couldn't help but laugh. Zhu Wei also laughed. Only Qi Guanghao had a confused look. Originally, this staff gathering of the banquet went on peacefully like this. Unexpectedly, when the sky outside was completely dark, a luxurious blue extended version maglev car drove into the manor. When human technology developed to a certain stage, cars, spaceships, and so on designed using mathematical principles, even if two planets were not connected, would be similar. Except for the lack of wheels, the cars in this world were similar in appearance to the cars on Earth. In Yang Tian's view, the appearance of some cars was not as good as the ones designed by humans on Earth. Of course, this was also due to different aesthetic standards. The door opened, and 6 big men got out of the car first, followed by a young man. The 6 big men and the young man were all cultivators. Their bodies emitted bursts of energy waves. The 6 burly men who got out of the car first were obviously bodyguards. Their cultivations were at the planet realm and Star King realm. The young man who was escorted by 6 bodyguards, who looked to be in his 20s, was only a planet warlord. Yang Tian glanced at them, then turned his head and asked Zhu Wei, "Can you protect the 2 of them by yourself?" Zhu Wei shook his head and said, "I do want to find more people. I also found a batch before." In the end, those people didn't work for more than a few days before I fired them. It's too difficult to find trustworthy people. After saying that, Zhu Wei immediately added, "Don't worry, they've already joined the Merchant Alliance. Ordinary people wouldn't dare to have any ideas about them." After that, Zhu Wei explained to Yang Tian what kind of organization the Merchant Alliance was. The Universe Business Alliance was a huge organization, and its members had to have a certain amount of wealth. At the same time, he had the right to make decisions for some large companies. After becoming a member of the Merchant Alliance, one could obtain the protection of the organization by paying a certain amount of membership fees every once in a while. Of course, the prerequisite was that the protected members couldn't be cultivators. This was a strange rule, but it was very practical. Ordinary humans and cultivators were people of 2 different worlds. The Merchant Alliance didn't want to get involved in the fights between cultivators. While Zhu Wei was talking, the young man had already walked in front of 7 Light Rain. He seemed very attentive as he chatted and laughed with 7 Light Rain. There was no danger at all. The young man's 6 bodyguards were scattered around him, making some customers stay far away from 7 Light Rain. Yang Tian turned his head and looked at the young man carefully before turning back to ask Zhu Wei, "Who is this person?" This young man had short, silver-white hair. He was wearing white casual clothes, and he looked very energetic. He's from the Taichu family. His name is Taichu Yuchen. He's just a nobody from the Taichu family, Zhu Wei said disdainfully. 7 Light Hao also had some understanding of him. At this moment, he said, "I heard from the students that this person has many women. He's not a good man." As soon as 7 Light Hao's words fell, Zhu Wei couldn't help but laugh and look at Yang Tian. An expert whether it was in terms of money or cultivation. As long as they reached one of these, it was very normal for them to have many women. Zhu didn't believe that Yang Tian didn't have any women who liked him. Zhu knew that there was Soli and 7 light rain in the college. He heard that a woman called Chu Yangang had also come to the college recently. She also had some relationship with Yang Tian. Yang Tian naturally knew why Zhu was laughing. He could only helplessly shake his head. He had never had any thoughts about 7 light rain. Taichi Yuqin came. Not long after, a few more young people came uninvited. They all put on a big show. The bodyguards these people brought with them all drove the 300 people who came first far away. The originally tranquil banquet suddenly changed its flavor. Many people bid farewell to 7 colored and left with a helpless mood. Seeing 7 light rain being surrounded by a few young people and frowning from time to time, Yang Tian finally stood up and walked over. Seeing Yang Tian walk over, a few men in black immediately blocked in front of Yang Tian. This was too much. Yang Tian slowly raised his hand and casually patted the arm of a man in black. He said with a smile, "Please make way." The black-clothed man who was hit by Yang Tian was immediately stunned. His body trembled slightly, and the expression on his face became very ugly. This was because Yang Tian had transferred a trace of origin power into this person's body. Facing Yang Tian's strange origin power, this person immediately used all the energy in his body and expended the origin power with great difficulty. However, this wasn't the end. After expending the origin power, his entire body became numb, and he couldn't even speak smoothly. "Please make way," Yang Tian said with a smile as he raised his hand and touched the men in black. Everyone touched by Yang Tian was the same as the man in black from before. Very soon, Yang Tian arrived beside 7 light rain and very naturally wrapped his arm around her waist. He said to the young masters with a smile, "I'm sorry, she's very tired. Can we talk about this later?" Yang Tian's sudden appearance stunned these people. Yang Tian wrapped his arm around 7 light rain's waist. 7 light rain's expression was very natural, as if this was very normal to her. Could it be that 7 light rain was often hugged by this person? Absolute beginning by Chun, and the other 6 disciples all had ugly expressions on their faces. "Who are you?" Inception Yu Chun sized up Yang Tian and asked with a frown. "Let me introduce myself," Yang Tian said with a smile. "Azure Dragon Family, Yang Tian." Yang Tian? When they heard this name, they all felt that it was very familiar. As for the Azure Dragon Family, they had never heard of it. Whoosh! Just as these people were puzzled, a green shadow flashed and appeared on Yang Tian's shoulder. This time, someone finally knew who Yang Tian was. Inception Yu Chun was the first to remember. He looked at Yang Tian's smiling face, gritted his teeth, and said to 7 light rain, "Since you're tired, I won't disturb you anymore." With that, Inception by Chun turned and left. Who was Yang Tian? The House of Inception knew better than anyone else. Even Inception Stone, who was at the Superstar Realm, had just been defeated by Yang Tian. The Taichu family also canceled the bounty on Yang Tian at once and ordered their family members not to have any conflicts with Yang Tian. Of course, this was not because the Taichu family had suddenly become weak. It was because Yang Tian had become a powerful warrior that they were wary of. The price to pay to kill a Superstar Realm warrior was too high, and it would harm the family's interests. Inception Yu Chun was only a mediocre member of the family. Of course, he would not dare to offend Yang Tian. He had to leave at once. He had to report this to his superiors. It seemed that he would have to think of another way to get control of the twin beauties. Inception Yu Chun left with his tail between his legs. The other 6 might or might not know who Yang Tian was. Regardless, they all said goodbye to 7 light rain and left the manor with their bodyguards. After they left, Yang Tian let go of 7 light rain and smiled embarrassedly at her. At this time, 7 light rain's face was already red. She let out a long breath and smiled at Yang Tian. "My performance just now wasn't bad, right?" Yang Tian nodded with a smile. "Ha! The name of the Azure Dragon family has been spread. You have to design a family emblem." Zhu laughed and walked over. After Zhu Wei finished speaking, Yang Tian grabbed the little blue dragon from his shoulder. Under the little blue dragon's confused eyes, Yang Tian put it in a variety of poses. Finally, it straightened its upper body, lowered its head slightly, and opened its 4 claws. This made Yang Tian satisfied. However, there were still some flaws. Xiaolong, cooperate and open your mouth. Yang Tian thought for a while and said to the little blue dragon. This was the first time the little blue dragon was manipulated by Yang Tian like this. However, it knew why Yang Tian was doing this. Hence, it opened its mouth and looked at him with a sharp gaze. Good. This is it. Take a picture of it. This is the emblem of our azure dragon family. Yang Tian was finally satisfied and said to Seven Colored at the side. Okay. Seven Colored immediately took out a palm-sized device from her storage bracelet and quickly took a picture of the little blue dragon. After taking the picture, Yang Tian let go of the little blue dragon and said with a smile, Xiaolong, you will be the symbol of our azure dragon family from now on. Squeak, squeak. The little azure dragon responded excitedly. Seven Colored quickly designed the family emblem that Yang Tian wanted and showed it to Yang Tian. The emblem was circular in shape. The little blue dragon was surrounded by a golden ring. It looked very domineering. This made Yang Tian very satisfied, and he nodded. Just like that, the Azure Dragon family emblem was finally completed. From now on, it would be passed down in the universe. Chapter 448. After giving the 8 sets of armor to Zhu Wei, 7 Light Hao, 7 Light Rain, and 7 Color, Yang Tian rested for a night and returned to the academy with 7 Light Hao the next day. On the way back, Yang Tian took out the beast cores he had exchanged for 7 Light Hao and gave them to 7 Light Hao. For 7 Light Hao, this was simply a timely reign because he was in the middle of learning about the beast cores. It was easier for ordinary cultivators to obtain star crystals, but it was more difficult to obtain beast cores. Sometimes they couldn't be bought with money. Otherwise, there wouldn't be beast cores in the exchange program of the academy system. After returning to the academy, Yang Tian gave the 4 sets of armor to Soli, Chuyin, and Gaing. Afterward, Yang Tian didn't stay idle. While waiting for the test, he spent most of his time in the special gravity room in the senior member area. Yang Tian used a special training method. With the gravity of planet Kaitra as the standard, the gravity changed from 10 times to 10 times, constantly changing. In addition to the gravity, the temperature of the entire gravity room, as well as the oxygen content and so on, were constantly changing. Cultivators could quickly adapt to a constant and unchanging environment. However, adapting to an environment that was constantly changing was rather difficult. It was in this extremely harsh environment that Yang Tian trained himself severely. The gravity room was very large and sturdy. The enlarged little blue dragon could also fight with Yang Tian in this environment. Although Yang Tian had reached the superstar realm, he was still beaten down by the little blue dragon in this special environment. This kind of training caused Yang Tian to almost forget the time. Soon, 20 days passed. When Yang Tian dragged his tired body out of the gravity room, panting, Professor Shenwu appeared in front of Yang Tian. This time, Professor Shenwu didn't find Yang Tian to ask for wine to drink from Yang Tian. In the future, Yang Tian didn't need to personally brew wine. Yang Tian had already told the 7 Light Rain sisters how to brew wine, as well as all the information he knew about wine. He believed that it wouldn't be long before there would be wine in the universe. The last time he went to the 7 Light Rain and 7 Color Rains manor, Yang Tian felt that something was missing during the banquet at night. In Yang Tian's opinion, a banquet without wine couldn't still be called a banquet. White wine, red wine, aged wine. As soon as he thought about it, his mouth began to secrete a lot of saliva. Yang Tian often thought how good it would be if he had a storage tool when he left Earth. He would definitely bring a lot of good wine. Not bad. No wonder you improved your cultivation realm so fast. Professor Shenwu walked in front of Tian and smiled. Yang Tian smiled and scratched his head. At this time, Yang Tian was Yang's of the sea, light rain of the sun moon of the sun of light rain, he looked like he had just been fished out of the water. The assessment starts tomorrow. Yang Tian, do you remember what I told you before? Professor Shinwu asked. Yes. Yang Tian nodded. That's good. Work hard. Professor Shinwu patted Yang Tian's shoulder and turned to leave. Yang Tian was very touched. This was the second time Professor Shinwu had reminded him for his future. People who didn't understand the conversation between the two would think that Professor Shinwu was encouraging Yang Tian, but only the two of them understood the meaning of those words. Professor Shinwu was reminding Yang Tian if he had thought it through. Yang Tian nodded, indicating that he wouldn't fight for the title of Chief Divine General. Professor Shinwu was relieved and no longer worried that Yang Tian would be sent to the 9 Barbarian Star Zone. Some of the cultivators participating in the assessment had a higher cultivation realm than Yang Tian, but Professor Shinwu knew that if Yang Tian fought hard, it wouldn't be difficult for him to become the Chief Divine General. Xiaolong, let's go back and eat barbecue. Yang Tian came back to his senses and said with a smile. The assessment was finally going to start, which meant that he would be able to see Qin Fei soon. Of course, Yang Tian was excited. Squeak, squeak. The little blue dragon squeaked excitedly when it heard that it was going to eat barbecue. During this period, Yang Tian had been training nonstop every day. After he went back, he took a shower and went to sleep. He wasn't in the mood to cook barbecue. The little blue dragon, who hadn't eaten barbecue in a long time, was naturally happy. After returning to Villa 099 in the advanced student area, Yang Tian took a shower and changed into a clean set of clothes. Then, he went up to the villa's rooftop and took out his barbecue equipment. One man and one dragon barbecued meat while drinking and eating. It was a very pleasant afternoon. After eating and drinking, they returned to the living room on the second floor. Yang Tian asked Belle to open the school system. Once the school system was opened, Yang Tian received a notification about the assessment. Yang Tian looked at it and asked Belle to open the assessment. There was no information about the assessment, only the number of participants. Including Yang Tian, there were a total of 423 people. This was about the same as Yang Tian's estimation. It was about a few hundred people. One had to know that those who were confident of passing the assessment were all advanced students who were at the Star Zone Lord level and Superstar Realm students who hadn't completed their graduation in the past 100 years. Not only was the number of participants listed, but there was also a description of their current cultivation realm behind the name of each registered cultivator. The 5 people with the highest cultivation realms were actually Superstar Warrior Realm. These 5 people were obviously the strongest contenders for the Divine General's assessment. After looking at the information, Yang Tian asked Belle to close the system and return to his room to sleep. This night was a sleepless night for many of the cultivators who registered for the assessment. This was because being able to work in the Superstar Divinity Temple was something that many cultivators dreamed of. Yang Tian laid on the bed and couldn't fall asleep for a while. He asked Belle to turn on the projection in the room and watch the video sent by Qin Fei again before closing his eyes. After a beautiful dream, Yang Tian was woken up by Belle because it was time to leave. After waking up, Yang Tian looked through all the rooms in Villa number 099 to make sure that he didn't leave any of his personal belongings behind. This was because after leaving this time, he probably wouldn't return. Finally, Yang Tian saw the support bell. Belle, are you willing to leave the school with me? Yang Tian looked at the support device floating in front of him and asked. Although Belle was just an intelligent program, Yang Tian was reluctant to part with it. After speaking, Yang Tian took out a fist-sized, silver-white support device from his storage bracelet. If Belle was willing, she could change the chip of the 2 devices. Master, Belle is willing to serve you. Belle replied without any hesitation. Yang Tian nodded and changed the chip of the 2 support devices. This way, it wouldn't be considered as taking the school's property for free. After changing the chip, Yang Tian put the support device into his storage bracelet, put on the blue armor, and left Villa number 099. As soon as Yang Tian left, he bumped into Soli. After greeting each other, they took their helmets and got into the school's special transport. Both of them didn't wear helmets, and Soli's expression looked a little nervous. Although as a female student, she had preferential treatment in this assessment, Soli was still a little worried. Why were women given preferential treatment in such an assessment? This was because there were very few goddess generals in the superstar divinity temple, and some special things needed to be done by goddess generals. For example, when the priestess of the temple went out, the priestess' personal guards needed female cultivators. Or guarding some interstellar empires ruled by empresses, it was easy for goddess generals to have a good relationship with the upper echelons of such empires. The Lanshan Empire that Qin Fei came from was such an interstellar empire. The transport sent the two of them to the teleportation point of the last bubble space experience. This was a big event for the school. The teleportation point was full of students and professors. Yang Tian. Suddenly, Chu Yinguying's voice sounded. Yang Tian turned around and saw Chu Yinguying in a red dress walking over quickly. After arriving in front of Yang Tian, Chu Yinguying was silent for a moment before saying faintly, "Everything went well. Don't worry." Yang Tian smiled and nodded. Then, he turned around and walked into the teleportation point with Soli. After entering the teleportation hall, Yang Tian saw that hundreds of people had already arrived, and even more people were coming. Even if they had left the Superstar Academy and registered, they still had to gather here. The teleportation array in the middle was guarded by 4 tall temple soldiers. These 4 temple soldiers were wearing the uniform armor of the temple. There were 2 horns on their helmets, and they held weapons that looked like harpoons in their hands. The middle-aged man with long black hair that Yang Tian saw in a conference hall when he just came back last time was also here. This person was obviously a divine general of the temple. At this time, he glanced at everyone with an expressionless face. Being glanced at by this divine general, no one spoke. They just stood there quietly, and the atmosphere was a little strange. About 10 minutes later, everyone had arrived. The middle-aged divine general nodded. Then, the teleportation array activated and lit up with blue light. At this time, Yang Tian and the others still did not know the specific content of this assessment. Seeing the array lit up, the middle-aged divine general waved his hand and said lightly, "The 5 of you will go together. When you get there, you will know what to do." As soon as the middle-aged divine general finished speaking, the 5 people closest to the array immediately put on their helmets and stepped on the teleportation array. During this process, no one fought over it. It was very orderly. About 10 minutes later, it was Yang Tian and Soli's turn. The 2 put on their helmets and walked on the teleportation array with the other 3 people. The blue light in front of them flashed and then disappeared. Boom, boom, boom. At this time, Yang Tian heard a slight rumbling sound around him. Yang Tian was very familiar with this sound because when the spaceship was flying, it made this sound. Yang Tian and the others were teleported to a large spaceship. This was a large cabin, and the teleportation array was placed in the middle of the cabin. The cultivators who were teleported here before were already standing in front of the window display. Because they did not know each other, they did not gather to talk. They just quietly looked at the endless starry sky outside. Chapter 449. According to the vibration of the spaceship, they knew that this spaceship was very big, but it wasn't very fast. It probably hadn't finished the teleportation yet. From time to time, 5 cultivators in different colored armors would appear on the teleportation array in the middle and walk down from the array. About 15 minutes later, the teleportation was finally completed. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Suddenly, the entire spaceship began to hum. Then, the starry sky outside disappeared, and it became dark. Obviously, the spaceship had started a space jump. At this moment, they all withdrew their gazes from the window display, and the cabin fell into silence again. Time seemed to pass very slowly for everyone. Yang Tian sat down on the ground and then laid down again. This was the most comfortable posture. Soli also squatted down next to Yang Tian. As for the others, some of them leaned against the arms of the cabin with their arms crossed, and some of them sat down against the cabin wall like Soli. But no one was like Yang Tian, lying on the ground with his arms and legs spread out. This posture was really indecent. After Yang Tian lay down, the little blue dragon jumped onto Yang Tian's chest and looked up at the people in the cabin. Yang Tian, what kind of training do you think will happen next? Soli contacted Yang Tian and asked casually. Who knows? We'll know when we get there. Soli, Yang Tian said and called Soli's name again. Soli replied. If we don't split up, follow me, Yang Tian said. Soli was silent for a moment and then nodded. The spaceship didn't take long in the space jump. After about half an hour, it stopped. The window display showed the starry sky outside again. At this moment, the cabin door opened. The middle-aged divine general walked in. Everyone get ready. Each of you has a lander that will land on a planet occupied by the insectoids. You'll pass if you survive 3 days on it. Then, we'll have a next test. I'll explain here that the landing point of the lander is different for everyone. The situation that you've encountered is something that you've never encountered before. The first test sounded like a survival challenge. The 3 days mentioned by the middle-aged divine general referred to the time it would take for the planet to complete 3 revolutions. Finally, the middle-aged divine general made it clear that they could still give up. This was because less than 50% of them would be able to leave the planet they were about to land on. There was no free lunch in this world. If one wanted to obtain a position in the superstar divine palace, they would have to pay a price. The middle-aged divine general quickly finished his explanation and then waved his hand. No one gave up. All of them quickly walked out of the spacious resting cabin. Yang Tian and the others were led to a landing pod. Each of them entered a cannonball-shaped landing pod that was about 5 meters tall and 3 meters in diameter. Soli remembered Yang Tian's words. She entered the landing capsule next to Yang Tian's. The huge spaceship that Yang Tian and the others were in had already flown outside the atmosphere of a gray-black planet. This planet was about twice the size of Earth. It was relatively close to the star, and one could tell at a glance that the temperature on it was very high. Clang after Yang Tian entered the special landing pod. The door closed automatically. Then, with a whoosh, the cabin was filled with air pressure. Fortunately, they could bring their pet beasts in this test. Yang Tian's blue armor and helmet were different from the previous armor. The little blue dragon could only stay on Yang Tian's shoulder. Squeak, squeak, squeak. As soon as the door closed, the little blue dragon asked Yang Tian what the Zergs were. Yang Tian smiled and said, Zergs are similar to exotic beasts. We'll just have to kill them when the time comes. As soon as Yang Tian finished speaking, the landing pod shook. They could clearly feel that it was falling rapidly. The spaceship flew around the planet. From its abdomen, landing pods that looked like bombs fell out. Attracted by the planet's gravity, they fell toward the planet's surface. The spaceship was very fast. The timing of the landing pods was also random. In less than 10 minutes, more than 400 landing pods were placed in various parts of the planet. As soon as these landing pods entered the atmosphere, their surfaces immediately turned red due to the friction with the air. They were like iron blocks that had been burned red by charcoal, and they fell faster and faster. During this process, Yang Tian realized that he had lost contact with Soli. This planet didn't have an ocean, but there were many lakes and volcanoes. The landing point was random. If one was lucky, landing by a lake would be the best. Then, landing on land would be the next best thing. If they were unlucky, they would probably fall into a volcano. Under the circumstances of falling at high speed, the landing pod might drill into the planet's magma layer. It would be troublesome to come out at that time. Thankfully, none of the 400 or so landing pods fell into the crater. The closest landing capsule to the crater was dozens of kilometers away. When all the landing pods were about a few thousand meters above the ground, spiral blades extended from their tails and began to spin rapidly, causing the landing pods to fall slower and slower. Yang Tian, who was in the landing pod, could clearly feel this change. Boom! After the deceleration began, less than a minute later, the landing pod roared and finally stopped. Whoosh! Immediately afterward, the hatch opened. The landing pod Yang Tian was and landed on land. As soon as the hatch opened, he ejected. This was a planet with a surface full of rocks and a small number of plants. The temperature was about 50 degrees Celsius. The air was very humid, and the oxygen content was very low. It was about 5% of the gas, and the gravity was about 3 times that of Earth. As soon as he exited the hatch, the armor system reported the surrounding environment. Slowly, after looking around, Yang Tian began to try to contact Soli. After a long time, the signal was connected. Yang Tian, Soli replied. How's the situation over there? Yang Tian asked. On an island in the center of the lake. There's no danger yet, Soli replied. Don't leave. I'll go to you right away, Yang Tian said. Okay. Soli immediately agreed. The little blue dragon heard their conversation. As soon as Yang Tian finished speaking, it transformed into a giant dragon. After swimming happily a few times in the air, it stopped in front of Yang Tian. Yang Tian immediately sat on the little blue dragon's back. Xiaolong, to the left. Yang Tian raised his hand and pointed in a direction. The little blue dragon glanced at the direction Yang Tian pointed and immediately flew in the direction Yang Tian pointed. On the spaceship, the middle-aged divine general who brought Yang Tian and the others to this planet was observing everyone's situation through the spaceship's monitor. On the big screen in the cockpit, images were quickly flashing. Every image was of the cultivators participating in the test landing on the surface of the planet. In less than half an hour, everyone had landed safely. However, the strange thing was that the middle-aged divine general said that this was a planet occupied by the insectoids, but so far, none of the cultivators who landed on the surface of the planet had discovered any traces of the insectoids. The insectoids were the same as the beasts. They were both life forms in the universe, and they were a powerful race. The beasts were actually the same as humans. They had similar body structures. However, the insectoids were different. The insectoids had all kinds of strange body structures. They also had a variety of attack methods, and they were very powerful. Some insectoids were large in size and had powerful strength and thick shells. Some insectoids were small in size, but could spit extremely corrosive venom. There were also some insectoids that lived in groups and could drown their enemies with insect tides. It was worth mentioning that insectoids had terrifying evolutionary abilities. They could change their inherited genes according to the changes in the environment, increasing or decreasing their internal organs to adapt to the environment. For humans and beasts to achieve this kind of evolutionary change, it would take more than 10,000 years. However, insectoids could achieve this in just a few generations. The time could be shortened to a few decades or even a few years. Their bodies could change at any time and place, and their attack methods were the same. Before human cultivators ruled the universe, the insectoids were the overlords of the universe. No other life form could defeat them. Later on, humans appeared and developed high-tech weapons to attack them. However, the insectoids also evolved organs and attack methods that could resist and counterattack human high-tech weapons. For example, the superpowered particle cannon. Even star-level cultivators would not dare to take on such weapons with their bare bodies. However, the insectoids, who have been fighting with humans for several years, could. They had evolved new shells that could reflect superpowered particle beams. Also, some insectoids could shoot out supermagnetic storms to disable high-tech equipment that approached them. In order to prevent humans from using robots to spy on them, the insectoids evolved insects that could detect human high-tech equipment. This terrifying evolution made it impossible for humans with high-tech equipment to deal with them. Fortunately, human cultivators were born, and the insectoids gradually disappeared from the eyes of humans. This situation was very similar to the situation on Earth when the YS virus broke out. It was not that there were no insectoids on the planet that Yang Tian and the others were on now, but they had not been released yet. This was specially designed by the Superstar Divinity Temple for the test. On this planet, the most terrifying insectoids in the universe were placed. They were frozen at low temperatures, and once the temperature rose, they would immediately wake up. Let's begin. After seeing that all the participating cultivators had landed safely, the middle-aged divine general smiled and issued an order to his subordinates. As soon as his voice fell, a long-haired beauty in office lady attire in the cockpit immediately pressed a red button on the control panel in front of her. At the same time, in the crust of the planet below, the thousands of equipment that had frozen the insectoids all stopped freezing. The temperature of the cryogenic chambers containing all kinds of insectoids began to rise rapidly. The little blue dragon flew very quickly. In less than 10 minutes, it arrived at the location indicated by Yang Tian. This was a large lake with a diameter of tens of kilometers. There was a small island in the center of the lake. When Soli, who was dressed in black armor, saw the little blue dragon flying over with Yang Tian on its back, she waved her hands happily. Chapter 450. After meeting up with Soli, the two people and one dragon immediately left the island in the center of the lake. By the lake, after Yang Tian and Soli dismounted from the little blue dragon's back, Soli immediately took out a detection device and began to analyze the planet's environment in detail. The results were basically the same as the armor system's analysis, but at the same time, they also obtained some other information. For example, there were microbes in the water, air, and rocks, and they were very dense. Ordinary humans would not be able to survive in such an environment because these microorganisms were deadly bacteria and viruses to them. For cultivators, their cells were already very strong, and microbes couldn't enter their bodies at all. Even if they did, they couldn't cause any harm to their bodies. With microbes living here, naturally, this planet also had a lot of life. The insectoids were a race with very strong vitality, and they could survive by eating organic matter. They could eat the water, rocks, and even the air on the surface of this planet, and they could continue to reproduce and strengthen their race. However, what puzzled Yang Tian and the others was that they hadn't seen a single insect after being on this planet for so long. Moreover, they didn't even see any traces of insect activity. Yang Tian and the others weren't the only ones who thought so. The other cultivators also found it strange after observing the planet's environment. Before setting off, Yang Tian and Soli had already brought enough food and water, so they naturally didn't need to stay near a water source in these 3 days. After Soli analyzed the surrounding environment, the two people and one dragon left the lake. If there really were insects, the water source would be a very dangerous place. What everyone didn't know was that in the thousands of underground freezers, a large number of insects had already awakened and started to crawl out of the ground. On the spaceship, "Sir, all the insects have awakened. In about a day, the insects will be able to occupy the entire planet." The beautiful operator turned around and reported to the middle-aged divine general. The middle-aged divine general nodded. "Prepare to activate the stellar storm. Activate it in 4 days and burn this planet, so that this star field won't be occupied by the insectoids after this assessment." "Yes." In the cockpit, all the staff members responded in unison. The Zergs had evolved to the point where they could migrate through the universe with just their physical bodies. When the resources of a planet were devoured by them, some of the insects would start to cannibalize each other to maintain the survival of their species. The other insects would burrow deep into the Earth's crust and begin to sleep, waiting for the planet's environment to change. Once there was a crisis for the insectoids on this planet would give birth to migrating insectoids and be ejected into space by the mother insectoid that produced them. These migratory bugs were also known as buds. They drifted freely in space, and when they encountered planets where the bugs could live, these buds would land on those planets. And then a wormhole was created. This kind of wormhole was the same as the teleportation formation disk that human cultivators created with runes. It had the function of teleportation. Once this kind of wormhole was formed, a corresponding wormhole would be created on the planet where the mother insect that threw the buds lived after sensing the formation of this wormhole. In this way, on a planet that had exhausted its resources, a large number of insects would go through such a wormhole to another planet suitable for their survival. In other words, buds were produced in pairs. One of them would stay on the original planet, while the other would be ejected into space. Ordinary humans, and even low-level human cultivators, could not live on a planet for a long time. To the insectoids, planets were like paradise. Take the solar system, for example. Aside from Earth, the insectoids could live on Mars, Venus, Enceladus, Europa, and other planets. Therefore, in the entire universe, there were a lot of planets suitable for the insectoids to live on. The buds that were projected into space could find a planet they could migrate to in a very short time. As the insectoids occupied more and more planets and connected with each other through a large number of wormholes, a large net would be formed. When the insectoids on a planet encountered a crisis, they could migrate to another planet and destroy the wormhole, preventing the enemy from exterminating all of them. Aside from migrating insectoids, the insectoids that went into hibernation due to the exhaustion of the planet's resources could actually sleep for tens of thousands of years. It was because of these methods that humans could not help but praise that the insectoids were difficult to exterminate. The middle-aged divine general gave the order, and the huge spaceship launched a large number of spherical objects toward the distant stars. At the right time, these objects could cause the stars to explode. This sort of stellar wind was actually the same as solar wind. Once it exploded, it could roast the nearby planets and destroy all life on these planets. After all the preparations were done and the countdown started, the middle-aged divine general looked at the surveillance image of the planet's surface and could not help but smirk. It was as if he could already see the scene of the cultivators below being surrounded by countless insectoids. Once the insectoids found a suitable environment, they could reproduce very quickly. No matter how powerful the few hundred cultivators below were, they would not be able to kill all the insectoids. The insectoids did not have any feelings of fear. They were not afraid of death. Even a superstar would not be able to last 3 days if they just kept killing the insectoids, let alone a star-grade cultivator. Only smart people or cultivators with special means could easily survive for 3 days on this planet. What about using high-tech equipment? Forget it. The insectoids could sense the energy fluctuations of these equipment. It would be fine if they were not used, but once they were used, they would become a beacon that attracted the insectoids. The assessment this time was not about who killed the most insectoids and whose results were the best. It was about who could survive these 3 days the easiest. Yang Tian, do you know about the insectoids? Soli suddenly asked while walking. Yang Tian shook his head. Not really. What's wrong? Soli said, you can imagine the entire surface of the planet, be it in the water, on the land, or in the air, is densely packed with insectoids. What kind of situation is that? A single insectoid is not scary. Even if there are countless of them, they will attack you continuously. However many you kill, they will come, and this will continue for 3 days. Following Soli's description, Yang Tian could not help but imagine the terrifying scene in his mind. He knew that this was not Soli's exaggeration. It was very likely to happen, and the situation was even more serious than he had imagined. After Soli finished speaking, the two were silent for a while. Unknowingly, Yang Tian and the others had arrived at a crater several kilometers in diameter that looked like it was formed by a meteor impact. Rumble, Yang Tian and the others had just glanced at this huge crater when suddenly a loud noise came from the mountain ahead. On one side of the cliff, there was a large hole. Although they were very far away, Yang Tian and the others could see that this hole was more than 10 meters in diameter. As soon as the cave appeared, a large head popped out of it and turned around. Yang Tian immediately pulled Saul down to avoid being seen by this huge insectoid. This huge insectoid had an oval head, 2 large pincers in its mouth, a thick feeler, and 2 protruding eyes. Under the gaze of Yang Tian and the others, this insectoid observed for a while and then retracted its head, not appearing for a long time. If killing insectoids could give him assessment points, Yang Tian would have rushed forward and killed this insectoid without hesitation. The insectoid retreated, but Yang Tian and the others didn't leave. Soli immediately took out a spherical detector and flew toward the hole. In less than a minute, the detector had already flown to the hole and slowly went in. After releasing the detector, Soli took out a tablet display device and projected a 3D image from it, showing the situation inside the hole. They thought they could see what kind of insectoid was inside. Unexpectedly, with a crisp sound, the detector was destroyed, and the 3D image disappeared. At the last moment before the image disappeared, both of them saw a huge head and countless black insectoid eggs piled up together. The huge insectoid that appeared just now was actually laying eggs. Sully shook her head and had to put away the display device. She said, "If I'm not wrong, this insectoid can sense the existence of such high-tech equipment." Unable to see the situation inside, the two of them could only take out binoculars from their storage bracelets and observe the hole from a distance. About half an hour later, long insectoids kept crawling out of the hole. The heads of these insectoids were very similar to the head of the previous giant insectoid. Their bodies were in sections, with a total of 12 segments and 2 rows of dozens of legs under their abdomens. These were just larvae that had just come out of their shells. Their bodies were about the thickness of a human arm. As soon as they came out of the hole, they began to grow rapidly under the illumination of the stars. At the same time, they were also gnawing on the darkest rocks around them. In less than 10 minutes, thousands of such insectoids crawled out and spread out. Seeing this, Yang Tian knew that if he didn't do anything, he and Soli would have to face the situation he had just imagined. Whoosh! While Yang Tian was thinking, a whistling sound came from the distance. The two of them looked in the direction of the sound and saw a huge insectoid more than 10 meters long sweeping across the sky in the distance. "We have to leave here immediately and find a place with fewer insectoids," Yang Tian said. Yang Tian said to the little blue dragon lying on his shoulder, "Xiaolong, go and take a look nearby." The little blue dragon nodded and disappeared in a flash. After the little blue dragon left, Yang Tian and Soli immediately retreated, carefully observing the surroundings while moving quickly. Chapter 451. Insects were life forms, and their bodies naturally emitted energy fluctuations. Yang Tian and Soli could clearly sense the situation around them. After traveling for about 10 minutes, the little blue dragon caught up with Yang Tian and Soli. It told Yang Tian that it had found a valley with no insects within dozens of kilometers. This was exactly what Yang Tian needed. Yang Tian and Soli immediately went to the place the little blue dragon found. After a quarter of an hour, they arrived at a valley between 2 short mountains. The insects had just been released and were rapidly reproducing. The density of insects on the planet was not very high. "Yang Tian, why did you find this place?" Soli asked in puzzlement as she looked at the seemingly ordinary valley in front of her. Yang Tian smiled. "Did you forget that I can use runes?" Soli immediately understood what Yang Tian was going to do next. Fighting the insects, constantly fighting, that was a foolish thing to do. It was better to find a place to hide and quietly stay there for 3 days. When the time was up, this test would be over. But how would they leave then? When they came down, the middle-aged divine general did not explain. Yang Tian shook his head with a wry smile. He felt that there might be some program at the last moment. Next, it was time for the strange program to come into play. Yang Tian walked around the valley at an extremely fast speed. The mountains on both sides are not high, only dozens of meters high, and the slope was not very steep. Ordinary humans could climb up. The valley in the middle was S-shaped, about 100 meters long and 50 meters wide. Such a place looked very ordinary, but it could be found everywhere on this planet. It seemed to be formed by the changes in the terrain and the impact of the water flow. While Yang Tian was observing the valley, the strange program recorded the surroundings through Yang Tian's vision. Next was the problem of the material. Yang Tian squatted down, casually picked up a small piece of rock, and crushed it into powder. Crushing the stone, Yang Tian relied entirely on the strength of his muscles. After that, Yang Tian crushed a few more stones. Through Yang Tian's reaction, the strange program knew the hardness of these stones. Terrain, stone hardness, gravity of the planet, air pressure, all these data were collected, and the strange program began to calculate at high speed. In less than half an hour, the strange program had designed the array that Yang Tian wanted. The talisman array mainly concealed one's aura and simulated that this place was a volcano. The insect intelligence was extremely low, so it probably wouldn't force its way in. Even if they broke in and dared to jump into the fire pit, the runa rays would still be able to protect Yang Tian and the rest of them inside the runa rays, as long as enough energy was provided. After the design was done, the next step was to draw it. Yang Tian took out a rune pen from his storage bracelet and began to draw runes on the rocks of this valley under the control of the strange program. Fortunately, the surface of this planet was all hard, grayish-black rocks and no sand. Otherwise, it would have been more difficult to build a runa ray. While Yang Tian was concentrating on drawing the runa rays, Soli and the little blue dragon were constantly paying attention to the situation around them. Before Yang Tian finished drawing the runa rays, they wouldn't allow a single insect to crawl over to disturb Yang Tian. Although this planet was twice the size of Earth, the distance between the tens of thousands of spots where the insects appeared was actually not far. With the insects' crawling speed and their reproduction speed, it would take less than a day for them to occupy the entire planet. By then, countless insects would spread out in search of food and encounter the cultivators who landed on the ground. In fact, it wouldn't take that long. While Yang Tian was drawing the rune rays, there were already cultivators fighting the insects. On the spaceship, the middle-aged divine general had been observing the cultivators below. Some people began to kill the insects. The low-level insects were constantly dying in their hands. They seemed to be very relaxed. Some people were constantly looking for a safe place. When they found an insect, they immediately avoided it. They tried not to fight with the insects. Some people began to dig holes after discovering the insects and avoiding them. It seemed that they wanted to hide in the caves. Of course, some people also hid in the water. But was it useful? Obviously not. The middle-aged divine general kept shaking his head when he saw the cultivators' actions against the insects. It was impossible to kill all the insects. The insects had an extremely sensitive sense of smell. After killing the insects, the fishy smell would spread out along with the airflow and attract more insects. Constantly avoiding them also wouldn't work. When the entire planet was full of insects, there would be no space to move. This was a planet without an ocean. The insects that crawled out of the ground could quickly spread across the surface of the planet. It was terrifying that the insects on this planet could reproduce so quickly. Of course, it was because these insects had been processed. It was useless to escape into the water. Insects existed in the air, land, and sea. There would be more insects underwater than on land. This was because there were many microorganisms in the water. The organic matter produced over a long period of time would be deposited at the bottom of the water, attracting a large number of insects. What about digging holes and hiding in the rocks? This seemed like a good idea. However, the insects had an extremely sensitive sense of smell. As long as there were energy fluctuations on the cultivators, they would be able to detect it. Humans were far inferior to insects in terms of digging holes. As time went by, every surveillance image was covered by a dense swarm of insects. There were many types of insects, at least 100. Among them, the most representative ones were the hatworms with a semicircular body and 8 legs under the abdomen. They crawled very quickly and released venom to attack enemies. There were also the hatworms that corroded and devoured organic rocks. These insects had extremely thick shells and strong defenses. They were easy to kill. The venom they spat out could even corrode the outer shells of spaceships. The armor worn by cultivators would be destroyed if it came into contact with the venom of these insects for a long period of time. The second type of powerful insect was the black star insect. Its body was huge and had 3 segments. When this insect grew into an adult, its body length could reach 20 meters and its height could reach 10 meters. Its tail could also shoot out extremely sticky silk. Once wrapped by this silk, cultivators at the planet realm would immediately lose their ability to move. For Star Realm cultivators, it would be fine if they didn't wear armor. Once they were wrapped in armor, it would be tantamount to spinning a cocoon around themselves. There was another type of powerful insect called the hunger insect. As the name implied, this type of insect was almost never full. They were very small, and an adult insect was only the size of a finger. However, they moved in groups, just like the army ants on Earth. Wherever these insects went, anything on the surface that could be eaten by them would be devoured by them. Don't think that you can kill them easily just because they are small. The bodies of these insects were extremely hard, just like a solid piece of alloy. When one stepped on the ground, they would only sink into the ground. In addition to the insects that crawled on the ground, there were also countless insects that could fly in the sky. When the middle-aged divine general saw these densely packed insects, his scalp went numb. With his reaction speed, he could clearly see more than 400 images. These were the surveillance images of every cultivator below. Soon, the middle-aged divine general turned his attention to one of the images. In this surveillance image, Yang Tian was holding a talisman pen and inscribing runes in a valley, using runes. Interesting. The middle-aged divine general muttered to himself after staring at the image for a few seconds. Chapter 452. Interesting didn't mean it would work, but the middle-aged divine general was intrigued. He immediately told the staff to magnify Yang Tian's image to the maximum. In order to maintain their position in the universe, the superstar divine temple had to absorb all kinds of talents, especially cultivators with special talents in certain areas. In fact, this middle-aged divine general had already noticed Yang Tian before this test. The test in the bubble-shattered space was just as Prophet Yu Hung had said. Next, this middle-aged divine general focused most of his attention on Yang Tian's image. Inscribing runes was a delicate job. Cultivators would be affected by psychological factors when inscribing runes, and the effects will be different. Sometimes, because of the slightest difference, the entire talisman array could be destroyed. However, this was not a problem for Yang Tian. The strange program combined with Yang Tian's body had become a precise machine. After about half a day, the talisman array in the valley was completed. Phew! After finishing the last stroke and regaining control of his body, Yang Tian let out a long sigh. At this moment, he could see that many rocks in this small valley were inscribed with runes. The total number of runes reached tens of thousands. For other rune cultivators, this was an impossible task. Seeing Yang Tian stop and put away the rune pen, Soli walked over and asked, "Is it done?" Soli was afraid of destroying the runes, so she was very careful when walking, avoiding the runes on the ground. Yang Tian didn't remind Soli. She didn't need to do so. If a rune lost its effect after being stepped on, it wouldn't be a successful rune. Yang Tian smiled and said, "It's done. Put the stellar crystal in the rune array's energy slot, and it will be activated." Squeak, squeak, squeak. As soon as Yang Tian finished speaking, the little blue dragon cried out. It told Yang Tian that a large number of insects were approaching. Even Soli, who didn't understand dragon language, could hear the urgency in the little blue dragon's cry. Clearly, a large number of insects were coming this way. Insects had a very sensitive sense of smell. The smell of Yang Tian's group had already drifted away with the airflow and was discovered by the insects far away. All kinds of insects swarmed toward Yang Tian's group like a tide. There were at least dozens of different types of insects. Some of them were huge, and the ground rumbled as they ran. Their movements were so loud that they could be heard from far away. For example, the black star bug. These insects were of different species, but they wouldn't attack each other. This was because they were all of the same species, and they had a special smell. This kind of smell would make different kinds of insects think that other insects were the same kind, so naturally, they would not attack each other. Yang Tian didn't expect the insects to come so soon. Fortunately, there was still time. Yang Tian quickly took out the star crystals from his storage bracelet and placed the 99 pieces of star crystals into the energy slot of the talisman array, according to the order. Every time a stellar crystal was placed, a part of the runes that formed the rune array would emit waves of energy. This was the signal for the rune array to be activated. The rune array designed by the strange program was very precise. It was also very precise to control Yang Tian's body. It was impossible to change it. When the last stellar crystal was put into the energy slot by Yang Tian, the valley began to change. First of all, it was an image. Standing in the valley, Yang Tian's group saw a virtual volcano above their heads that was emitting thick smoke. Yang Tian's group didn't have very good vision. If they looked from outside the valley, the whole valley would disappear, and a small volcano about 100 meters tall with a radius of 1 kilometer appeared. If it was just this kind of image, it would not be able to fool the insects. Immediately after, the scorching energy spread out. The water in the surrounding air was heated up. After being driven by the air, it cooled down and formed a faint white mist. At the same time, all the energy waves in the valley were absorbed by the rune array and couldn't be transmitted outside the valley. When the rune array was successfully activated and started to work, Yang Tian immediately took off his armor. He also asked Soli to take off her armor and put it into his storage bracelet. This was because the armor could transmit signals, and the rune array couldn't block this kind of signal energy. As soon as they took off their armor, Yang Tian and Soli immediately felt uncomfortable. The temperature outside was very high, and the oxygen content was low. Ordinary humans couldn't survive in this environment. Both of them were powerful cultivators and quickly adapted. This rune array could let the people in the valley see outside, but people outside the valley couldn't see inside. High-tech virtual projection equipment could also achieve this effect, but it couldn't produce this kind of realistic energy or block the energy in the valley. Rumble. The insects were very close. Even an ordinary human standing in this valley could hear the movements outside. Yang Tian was very confident in this rune array. Even if the insects found that this virtual volcano was their home, they wouldn't be able to break in. Yang Tian had enough star crystals in his storage bracelet to consume. Sensing the approaching insects, Soli was a little nervous. However, Yang Tian took out a grill, delicious beast meat, various seasonings, and wine, and started a roast meat. The little blue dragon drooled when it saw Yang Tian take out these things. It jumped onto the round table Yang Tian took out and waited for the meat to be cooked. "Is this okay?" Soli asked in a low voice, her eyes wide open. Yang Tian said with a smile, "Don't worry, it'll definitely work." With that, Yang Tian laughed. Before a skewer of meat was cooked, the swarm of insects had arrived. They stopped a few kilometers away from the valley and didn't move forward. In the eyes of these insects, there was a volcano in front of them, and they could even feel the scorching energy from the volcano. With their simple-minded minds, they could not figure out why the aura of the otherworldlings had disappeared when they had sensed it earlier. On this planet, volcanoes were probably the only forbidden area that the insects were afraid of. Not only the insects, but even on the screen monitoring Yang Tian, there was only a small volcano left. The monitoring map also showed the energy value. It looked no different from other volcanoes. If he hadn't been monitoring the location of the valley, the middle-aged divine general would have thought that this volcano that suddenly appeared was real. In fact, if one looked at this volcano carefully, anyone with some knowledge of geography would know that its existence was extremely unreasonable. The insects didn't know how to think about such a problem. After staying for a while and not finding any aliens, they began to slowly disperse. At this time, Soli was finally relieved. Chapter 453. Yang Tian, Soli, and the little blue dragon were happily eating barbecued meat. Meanwhile, the other cultivators were having a tough battle with the insects. Moreover, there were already casualties at this time. Every time someone died, the surveillance screen would go black and be shut down by the AI system. In such a battle with insects, once someone died, they would have a chance to revive because their body would be instantly eaten by large numbers of insects. Screech, a Star State cultivator in red armor, was exhausted after fighting with the insectoids for a day and night. He could only take out his high-tech weapon and shoot at the dense swarm of insects. But soon, the particle gun in his hand stopped due to the high temperature. The red-armored cultivator immediately threw away his gun and took out a plasma bomb from his storage bracelet. After throwing it on the ground, it exploded. The surrounding area was filled with a strong electric current, making chi-chi sounds. The insects were instantly wiped out. This cultivator stood at the center of the explosion. His armor was insulating, so he wouldn't be injured by the electric current. Although the surrounding bugs were killed, more of them came rushing over. They not only ate the bodies of their own kind, but they also continued to attack this cultivator. Rustle. Suddenly, the sound of large numbers of insects crawling came from all directions. After hearing this sound, the red-armored cultivator was shocked. He immediately jumped up, wanting to escape. He had encountered this situation before. It was the sound of large numbers of hungry insects crawling. The worms of hunger's gnawing ability was too terrifying. They could even chew through the armor on their bodies. Due to their small size and large numbers, if he stayed on the ground, he would be instantly drowned. An Eternal Star Realm cultivator could move very quickly. The cultivator instantly disappeared from the spot. After escaping the encirclement of the insects, he moved quickly and finally arrived at a place where there were no insects. He could finally breathe a sigh of relief. But in less than 3 minutes, large numbers of insects appeared again. The red-armored cultivator sighed and fled to the next location. Such a situation had happened dozens of times in the past 2 days. Every time he stopped, he would be immediately discovered by the insects. If he didn't escape in time and stayed where he was to kill the insects, it wouldn't be long before he was surrounded by the insects. The density of insects on the ground was increasing. What about flying into the sky? That would be even more dangerous. There were flying insects in the sky, and they would immediately pounce at cultivators. There were many types of insects that could fly. The most numerous of them were the 10-meter-long zerglings that looked like Earth's mosquitoes. These zerglings had 2 pairs of wings, a round head, and a sharp beak that was over a meter long. Their flying speed was close to the speed of sound. Cultivators flying in the air after being discovered by these bugs would be attacked by these zerglings. The raptor's sharp mouths were as hard as the alloy shell of the spaceship. This kind of mouth, coupled with the speed of the attack, could destroy the armor worn by the cultivators. There were also small insects in the sky. These insects were very similar to the insects on the ground. The only difference was that they had an extra pair of wings. These insects were called flying devourers. Once surrounded by an army of these insects, it would be dangerous. The insects flying in the sky would also attack cultivators on the ground. After being attacked dozens of times by the insects, the cultivator in red armor had used up most of his energy. He didn't have time to rest and recover his energy. He could only eat low-level beast cores to replenish his energy. He didn't have Yang Tion's endurance, and he didn't have Yang Tion's many high-level beast cores. The situation was getting more and more dangerous for him. After running away dozens of times, he had used up too much energy. At the same time, he was discovered by a large number of flying devourers in the sky. These flying devourers were like a large black cloud. They directly covered the cultivator in the sky. The cultivator in red armor was shocked and tried to run away again. At this time, a buzzing sound was transmitted into the brain of the cultivator in red armor. This was a strange energy wave. It sounded like it was heard, but in fact, it directly affected the nerves of the human brain. As soon as he heard this sound, the cultivator in red armor slowed down. This energy wave caused the energy in his body to become chaotic. This was a special ability that the insect race had evolved to deal with cultivators. As soon as the cultivator in red armor slowed down, he was instantly drowned by countless flying devourers and hungry insects. A few minutes later, when the insects scattered, nothing was left except for some red armor fragments and a black storage bracelet. The same thing happened to the cultivator in red armor happened to other cultivators. Stargrade cultivators could only hold out for about 2 days against the encirclement of bugs. However, it was relatively easier for superstar cultivators. In the face of the insects' attacks, several superstar cultivators kept appearing all over the planet. They were very smart. They used this high-speed method to travel outside the swarm of insects. Compared to Yang Tian, this method of escape was much more strenuous. Under the insects' attacks, time seemed to pass very slowly. It was the same for Yang Tian and Soli. In these 2 days, Yang Tian had already replaced the stellar crystal 3 times. From this valley, he could see the situation outside. In these 2 days, the number of insects had increased by quite a bit. This could be seen from a number of insects flying in the sky. When the array had just been activated, there were only a few insects flying in the sky. 2 days later, there were hundreds of insects circling in the sky at all times. These were only the large insects. There were even more small ones. When the density of insects increased, it was inevitable that some collisions would occur. Yang Tian was just about to put away the grill and take a break when a bug fell from the sky. It was a beetle-like insect with a body length of 5 meters. This guy was in the process of flying. After being struck by a zergling, his wings were damaged, and he fell down. When the bug fell, Yang Tian couldn't help but be shocked when he saw it. If this bug was repelled by the array, the other insects would discover the abnormality here, and the array would be attacked by the insects. Yang Tian didn't want this to happen. He immediately communicated with the strange program. In the blink of an eye, the strange program took control of Yang Tian's body. He raised his hands and quickly made several runic gestures. The nearby defense functions were immediately shut down. Pong! The large insect fell from the sky and smashed into the valley. Chapter 454. After this insect fell, it didn't die from the fall. It immediately got up and shook its wings, trying to fly again. However, because its wings were damaged, it fell to the ground again as soon as it flew into the air. Yang Tian raised his head and looked at the sky. Fortunately, after this insect fell, it didn't attract the attention of other insects. Unable to fly into the sky and discovering Yang Tian's group, this insect turned its head and immediately pounced on Yang Tian. When this insect pounced, Yang Tian had already taken out a knife from his storage bracelet. He dodged sideways, raised the knife, and chopped off the insect's head. The insect's vitality was extremely strong. Even if its body and head were separated, its head and body were still trembling. The air was immediately filled with a fishy smell. In order to avoid the situation just now, Yang Tian turned off the defense of the talisman array and didn't immediately activate it. This insect head was triangular, very similar to the head of a mantis on Earth. There were 2 large pincers on both sides of its mouth, emitting a white metallic luster. It was obvious that they were extremely hard. Although separated from its body, the pair of antennae on its head were still swaying, and the pair of pincers on its mouth were also opening and closing. Yang Tian, he's sending a message outside. Soli walked over and saw the antennae on the insect's head constantly swaying. She frowned and reminded Yang Tian. Insects could also communicate with each other, just like radio. Therefore, as long as one insect discovered it, a large number of insects would swarm over. Yang Tian smiled and said, "Don't worry, its message can't be sent out. This talisman array could prevent the internal energy from being transmitted to the outside. The message sent by the insect was also a kind of energy fluctuation, so of course, it couldn't be transmitted out." Yang Tian took off his armor and told Soli not to wear it. In fact, he hoped that there wouldn't be any abnormal energy fluctuations inside the talisman array. This was also a cautious approach. Almost 2 days had passed. Even if the talisman array failed now, Yang Tian and the others could still hold on for another day. After a long time, the bug's head was still moving. It had been half an hour since Yang Tian had cut off its head, but the bug still hadn't truly died. However, its body was already motionless. Soli couldn't stand it. She took out her whip and wanted to smash the head. However, Yang Tian raised his hand to stop her. Soli was puzzled and looked at Yang Tian in confusion. Yang Tian smiled and took out a box from his storage bracelet. The box was made of green crystals, and there were runes engraved on it. Soli was very familiar with this kind of box. She had 10 of them. If the beast core was stored in such a box, even without the transparent shell made from the gelatinous substance of the fruit peel, the energy of the beast core would not dissipate. Why did Yang Tian take out this box? Don't tell me I'm going to feed this insect a beast core? Soli opened her eyes wide and looked at Yang Tian curiously. Yang Tian quickly opened the box. As soon as the box was opened, a powerful energy fluctuation came out of the box. Inside the box was not a beast core, but a lump of minced meat. It was grayish-white in color, and there were traces of scarlet in it. This is... Soli's eyes widened as she exclaimed in surprise. This is... Sensing the intense energy fluctuations, Soli's eyes widened. She had already guessed it. Yang Tian smiled and said, "That's right. These are some of the cells taken from the mysterious corpse." Sure enough, Soli thought. Soli also knew that Yang Tian had brought back that mysterious corpse, but she didn't expect that Yang Tian would actually hide it. However, even if she was in such a situation, she would probably do the same. Who wouldn't want good things? "What are you doing?" Soli walked up to Yang Tian, squatted down, and asked curiously. Yang Tian was also squatting. When Soli asked this, he looked up and happened to see Soli's chest. Soli didn't wear any armor, so she took out a loose bathrobe and put it on. Yang Tian only glanced at it once before he withdrew his gaze. He coughed twice before he looked at the lump of meat in the box. He smiled and said, "I want to see what kind of changes will happen if these cells come into contact with the cells of an insect. Why do you think so?" Soli looked up at Yang Tian and asked in surprise. Hearing Yang Tian's words, she felt that Yang Tian's way of thinking was really strange. Or rather, it was what humans on Earth would say, a hole in the brain. If it were her, she definitely wouldn't associate that mysterious corpse with a bug's head in front of her. Yang Tian didn't want to hide it from Soli. He told her that the Flying Cloud Great Priest once wanted to use these cells to change his body's state. However, the result was, of course, failure. Not only did he not become stronger, but his body cells also lost the ability to regenerate. If not for this reason, the Flying Cloud Great Priest could have lived for many more years. Soli finally understood the origin of Yang Tian's idea. He couldn't experiment on a human body, but he could experiment on a bug to see what kind of changes would occur. A few more minutes passed while the two were talking. The bug's head was still alive, and its tentacles were still waving slowly. It seemed that this guy wouldn't give up until it attracted its own kind and couldn't bear to die. Then, Yang Tian took out a dagger. This dagger was a weapon left behind by Yang Tian's grandfather, Yang Tian. There were 2 daggers in total, and Yang Tian still had both of them. Yang Tian used the tip of the dagger to pick up a lump of meat in the box and stained it with some cells. It was very difficult to extract cells from the entire corpse. Yang Tian had only managed to cut off some with a talisman brush. But now, he was able to do it by just poking with a dagger. It was obvious that the cells were not tightly linked together. This might be because it was separated from the main body. Sensing that there were cells on the tip of the dagger, Yang Tian immediately closed the box and put it in his storage bracelet. If this experiment didn't yield any results, this lump of meat would be difficult for him for a long time. Also, if he encountered other types of life forms in the future, he could use it for experiments. Even though there were only a few cells, the tip of the dagger emitted powerful energy waves, which Soli could naturally sense clearly. These powerful cells absorbed most of Yang Tian's mental power with just a few cells, and there were no obvious changes. After putting the box in his storage bracelet, Yang Tian wiped the tip of the dagger on the bug's head where it had been cut off. Next, he would see if there would be any changes. Chapter 455. Yang Tian didn't really expect any changes. This experiment was just an idea he came up with on the spur of the moment. A few minutes later, Yang Tian, Soli, and the little blue dragon all opened their eyes wide. That was because the insect's head really began to change. First, the broken part of its neck began to heal slowly. Originally, with the passage of time and the loss of body fluid, this insect's life force became weaker and weaker. But now, the life force began to grow stronger and stronger. More than 10 minutes later, this insect's head was full of exuberant life force. A few cells had actually made this insect's head come back to life. The strengthened insect's head waved the 2 antennae on its head again, and its mouth kept opening and closing. Seeing this, Soli frowned and said, "Something's not right." Yang Tian nodded. Because the insect's waving of its antennae was extremely messy, it didn't emit any energy information to its own kind. Just as Yang Tian and the rest were feeling puzzled, The insect head started to vibrate rapidly. The outer shell started to crack and crack. Even the surface of the insect's eyes was cracked. Yang Tian and Soli couldn't help but look at each other. They both knew that when Yang Tian put the powerful cells on this insect head, it wasn't the insect's head that came back to life, but the cells that came back to life. These cells were using the insect's cells to divide at an extremely fast speed. The insect's shell cracked. Would it explode next? Judging from the commotion, it was very likely to happen. Yang Tian and Soli immediately got up and retreated more than 10 steps. At this moment, the insect's head trembled more and more violently, and the life force it emitted became stronger and weaker. Pung! As expected, the insect's head suddenly exploded, spraying dark green liquid and fragments of the insect's head in all directions. Did this experiment fail? After Yang Tian and Soli dodged, they looked at where the insect's head was and saw a light green ball of flesh the size of a soccer ball. The ball of flesh was covered in liquid, and after coming into contact with the air, it began to dry at an extremely fast speed. It looked like the brain of an insect. Its surface was bumpy and filled with zigzagging gullies. This insectoid cerebrum did not emit any aura of life, but it released a powerful energy wave. The aura of life and energy waves were two different concepts. In other words, this insectoid brain was dead, but it contained a huge amount of energy. Yang Tian did not expect that the reaction between his powerful cells and the insectoid brain would result in something like this. What is this? Soli looked at the meatball and asked curiously. Yang Tian shook his head. I don't know either. As he spoke, Yang Tian approached the meatball. Before he figured out what it was, Yang Tian would never touch it with his hands. After slowly approaching the meatball, Yang Tian squatted down and used a bit of his mental power to slowly approach the meatball. Yang Tian predicted that the same thing would happen again, where his mental power would be completely absorbed by the meatball. However, that was not the case in reality. When Yang Tian's mental power entered the meatball, he was surprised to find that there was a different situation inside. The inside of the meatball was filled with messy green threads that looked like glass fibers. In addition to the threads, there were also countless small round particles, which were also light green, distributed on the threads. After a quick inspection, Yang Tian withdrew his mental power. The meatball did not seem to be of any use. Yang Tian took out the red saber from his storage bracelet again, ready to cut it in half. Wait! Just as Yang Tian was about to cut, the strange program's voice suddenly rang in his mind. What? Yang Tian asked in his mind. You need to observe more carefully for me to be able to determine, the program said. Yang Tian did not ask the program again. He knew that there must be a reason why the program asked him to do this. Perhaps this meatball was a treasure. It was like an antique. Those who did not know its value would treat it as scrap metal, but those who knew its value would be able to tell that it was priceless. Yang Tian had only observed the meatball from a macroscopic perspective earlier. This time, he observed the internal structure of the meatball from a microscopic perspective. The threads within the meatball, as well as the granular objects, gradually grew larger in Yang Tian's vision. It was then that Yang Tian realized that the threads and the particles were all made of cells. The strange thing was that the cells did not have a nucleus. Instead, they were transparent liquids. It was these liquids that were emitting waves of energy. After learning about the internal structure of the meatball, Yang Tian withdrew his mental power from the meatball. The function of mental power was similar to consciousness. In particular, when it was used to observe things other than one's own body, it could be used to observe from a microscopic perspective. You've seen everything now. What do you think? Yang Tian asked the strange program in his mind. The program replied, The structure of this insectoid brain is more perfect than your brain to me. I want to transfer into it. He did not expect it to be an insectoid brain. When Yang Tian saw the meatball, he thought that it was formed from insectoid brain. He did not expect it to be true. How was it formed? Yang Tian asked curiously. Yang Tian knew that a real insectoid brain would not have such a structure. It was obvious that the powerful cells had mutated after combining with the insectoid brain. To those powerful cells, the insectoid brain might have been an unsuccessful mutation. Of course, this was only a guess. Yang Tian did not know what the actual situation was. When Yang Tian asked, the strange program replied, "If I transfer into this insectoid brain, I might be able to provide you with an answer." To be honest, the current Yang Tian was somewhat reluctant to let the strange program leave his mind. If there was a rune program in his brain, he would be a rune genius. Don't worry. When you need me, I can contact you at any time. I can also transfer back into your brain. Usually, I will be lodging in this insectoid brain. The strange program naturally understood Yang Tian's thoughts and said to Yang Tian, "All right," Yang Tian said. "Then how can I transfer you into the insectoid brain?" To Yang Tian, this was a perfect solution. After all, no one would want another life form to exist in their brain. Although the strange program was just a program, it had the ability to think independently. It was no different from a real intelligent life form. The only difference was that it did not have a body. It was the same for the strange program. Yang Tian's thoughts would often cause it to stop calculating. When Yang Tian asked, the program replied, "I am also a type of energy. You can use your spiritual energy to contact the insectoid brain. I will transfer my spiritual energy into the insectoid brain. This process will not take too long, but you must not stop." "What will happen if it is stopped?" Yang Tian asked. The program replied, "If it is stopped, the data link that makes up me will break, just like how I cut you humans in half. Then how do I contact you in the future?" Yang Tian asked. The program replied, "You will understand when the time comes." Yang Tian, what's wrong? Seeing that Yang Tian was frowning and did not speak for a long time, Soli asked. Yang Tian said, "It's nothing. I am using my spiritual energy to observe the internal structure of this insectoid brain. It'll be very important later, so you must not disturb me." Soli immediately nodded and retreated to the side. Hearing Yang Tian say that he must not be disturbed, the little blue dragon also became alert. Next, Yang Tian picked up the insectoid brain from the ground. It did not look big, but it was very heavy, like a solid iron ball. After he was ready, Yang Tian channeled a strong spiritual energy into the insectoid brain in front of him. "I'm starting." The program reminded Yang Tian after it noticed that Yang Tian's spiritual energy had stabilized. During the process of channeling his spiritual energy, Yang Tian could clearly feel that a force was being transmitted to the insectoid brain through his spiritual energy. If Yang Tian wanted to, he could of course reject this force. If that happened, the program would be done for. Of course, Yang Tian did not have such thoughts at all, not even as a joke. He focused all his attention on the insectoid brain in his hand. As the program said, the process was not long. It lasted about 3 minutes before the transfer was complete. When Yang Tian noticed that his spiritual energy was not attached to any other energy, he persisted for another minute before stopping. After retracting his spiritual energy, Yang Tian exhaled and said plainly, "It's done." Although he did not use much spiritual energy just now, Yang Tian was tense, afraid that something would go wrong during the transfer. Now that the transfer was successful, Yang Tian finally relaxed his tense nerves. Soli was about to ask Yang Tian what he had observed when she was surprised to find that the insectoid brain in Yang Tian's hand suddenly emitted life energy. The insectoid brain was actually alive, from life to death, and then to life again. This thing was too strange. Yang Tian was not surprised. Instead, he was happy for the program because this meant that it had perfectly merged with the insectoid brain in a short period of time. Next, the insectoid brain began to melt like a piece of ice. Seeing this, Yang Tian became nervous again. "I'm fine. This is removing excess cells. They're useless impurities." Suddenly, the program's voice sounded in Yang Tian's mind. "How did you do it?" Yang Tian asked curiously in his mind. Yang Tian was asking how the program contacted him. The program said, "Your human brain will emit a kind of energy wave. I've been in your brain for so long, so I naturally know the frequency of this energy wave and can simulate it. Yang Tian understood halfway through the program's explanation. The energy wave that the program was talking about was what humans on Earth called brainwaves. With the program's reminder, Yang Tian was no longer worried. Soon, the insectoid brain in Yang Tian's hand shrunk many times to the size of a ping-pong ball. Then, it split into two and finally turned into two small insectoid brains the size of 2 fingers. During this process, the program kept explaining to Yang Tian. Of the 2 insectoid brains, one was kept as a spare. This was because the production of insectoid brains was only accidental. In the future, if there was a problem with one of them, there would be another one. Chapter 456. Now that the insectoid brains were so small, it would be easier to carry them around. They were only the size of a finger, so he could just make a necklace and wear it around his neck. Because they already had life, he couldn't put them in his storage bracelet. There was a strange program inside the 2 insectoid brains. One of them was the main body of the strange program, while the other was the secondary body. The 2 insectoid brains were also connected. If an accident happened and the secondary body was destroyed, it wouldn't affect the main body. But if the main body was destroyed, the instance would be activated. How did these insectoid brains come about? Yang Tian asked the strange program curiously as he looked at the 2 insectoid brains in his hand. The strange program replied, "Please wait a moment. I'm reading the relevant memories left behind by the cells." Memories left behind by the cells. The strange program's answer was very calm, but Yang Tian was very shocked when he heard it. Although he didn't say anything, his expression showed it. Soli naturally saw Yang Tian's expression. She didn't know about the conversation between Yang Tian and the strange program, but she was also very shocked by the changes in the insectoid brains. She wondered what the 2 small meatballs in Yang Tian's hand could do. While the strange program was reading the memories of the insectoid brains, Yang Tian took out a bottle of water and washed his hands and the 2 insectoid brains clean. The 2 insectoid brains looked like 2 small spades. When the time came, he could order 2 round, hollow metal shells and a necklace to make 2 pendants. He could then put the 2 insectoid brains in the metal shells and carry them around. After washing the 2 insectoid brains in his hands, Yang Tian found a rock and sat down, silently waiting. After about 10 minutes, the strange program's voice sounded in Yang Tian's mind. "The memories of the cells have been read," the strange program said. "Hurry up and tell me, what memories do the insectoid brain cells have? Do they have the memories of that mysterious young man?" Yang Tian was very expectant and eagerly asked. Human cells had memories. Yang Tian had heard about this back on Earth. Some patients who received organ transplants would have the memories of the original owner. For example, if you don't smoke, you'll have the desire to smoke. Sometimes, you'll even dream of some scenes that the original owner of the organ encountered when he was alive. These were some of the memories that the original owner of the organ brought to the transplant recipient. This also showed that every cell in a person's body was a memory, not just the brain cells. If the strange program could read the memories of the mysterious young man, Yang Tian would know a lot about the other world. However, the strange program replied, "Yes, but it is very vague and requires a long time to calculate and process." However, his memories regarding the insectoids were very clear. It even contained the inherited memories of the insectoids. There's also the reason why the insectoid brain was produced. Yang Tian did not really care about the inherited memories of the insectoids. However, Yang Tian was very interested in the reason for the formation of the insectoid cerebrum. The strange program explained. After the powerful cells came into contact with the insectoid brain cells, they changed the structure of the insectoid brain cells and wanted to grow a new human head. Because the insectoid brain cells are too weak to withstand the modification, it failed. Hearing this result, Yang Tian frowned. What did this mean? It meant that the mysterious corpse was very likely to come back to life. As long as a suitable host was found, it would be able to grow a new head and then a new body. Or perhaps the corpse did not grow a head because the head was still there, Or perhaps there was a mysterious connection between the corpse and the head. Where's the head? Yang Tian. While Yang Tian was thinking, the strange program called out. What is it? Yang Tian asked. The strange program said, we can leave now. I can control the insectoid cerebrum to emit energy waves that only insectoids can emit. They will treat you as one of their kind. So magical? How did you do it? Yang Tian asked. Yang Tian wanted to know how the strange program used the energy contained in the insectoid cerebrum. The strange program said, this is a complicated process that I cannot explain. However, I can tell you that the energy contained in the insectoid cerebrum can allow me to exist for hundreds of millions of years. Yang Tian was not surprised by this. On the way back, Yang Tian knew that the energy contained in every cell of the corpse was stronger than that of an eternal star realm or even a superstar realm cultivator. If he could extract the energy from these cells, it would probably be able to create thousands of top-notch cultivators. This was probably why the Superstar Divinity Temple was so anxious to obtain the corpse. Since that mysterious young man was so powerful, how could he have been killed? Also, since this corpse was so important, why did the Superstar Divinity Temple not send out their strongest people to search for it? For a moment, many incomprehensible questions appeared in Yang Tian's mind. Was it necessary to leave this valley? Yang Tian was a little hesitant. It was very safe to stay here, but if he went out, he might face a lot of trouble. This was not because Yang Tian was a coward, but in the current situation, there was no need to leave this place. While Yang Tian was hesitating, the strange program said to him, I want to test if the insectoid inheritance is useful. You might not know, but the insectoids on this planet are not complete, and there are no intelligent insectoids among them. If intelligent insectoids are born and command the insectoids to fight, this place will be discovered sooner or later. So it was like that, all right. Yang Tian nodded and said in his mind. The strange program continued. The emergence of intelligent insectoids is a matter of time. This is the perfect way for the insectoids to evolve. Every high-level life form race would not be a perfect race if there were no intelligent ones. In other words, as time passed, an intelligent high-level insectoid would soon be born on this planet. After understanding the strange program's thoughts, Yang Tian smiled and said to Soli, Soli, let's leave this place and take a look outside. Okay. Soli did not ask Yang Tian why and simply nodded. Yang Tian liked Soli's straightforwardness. Yang Tian took off his robe and put it into his storage bracelet, leaving only a pair of shorts on. Then, he took out the blue armor and put it on. Soli did the same. Yang Tian glanced at Soli's beautiful body and blushed. After the two put on the armor, Yang Tian put one of the insectoid brains into the small storage compartment of the armor and gave the other to Soli. The little blue dragon lay on Yang Tian's shoulder. After the preparations were done, Yang Tian and Soli carried their weapons and slowly walked out of the area covered by the spell. On the spaceship, the middle-aged divine general was constantly paying attention to the situation below, especially to Yang Tian. Although Yang Tian's location was covered by the projection of a volcano, the surveillance screen was still enlarged. Seeing Yang Tian and Soli walk out of the range of the volcano, the middle-aged divine general was a bit surprised. Was that rune array about to lose its effect? Or was Yang Tian unable to bear the loneliness and wanted to experience the feeling of fighting insectoids? It must be noted that there is not much time left until the end of this test. While the middle-aged divine general was paying attention to Yang Tian, a staff member enlarged the surveillance screen and said to the middle-aged divine general, Sir, there's a superclass cultivator named Wu Yala killing other cultivators. After the staff member finished speaking, he turned around. The middle-aged divine general immediately turned his attention to the surveillance screen of Wu Yala. In this test, there was no rule stating that cultivators could not kill each other. This cultivator, named Wu Yala killing other cultivators, did not violate the rules of the test. Clearly, Wu Yala was doing this to increase his chances of being selected. His thoughts and actions were simple and direct. If he killed everyone else and was the only one left, he would definitely be selected by the Superstar Divinity Temple. Logically speaking, stargrade cultivators with a lower cultivation level should not be a threat to him. However, almost all of the people he killed were stargrade cultivators. This seemed like he was bullying the weak and fearing the strong. Or maybe he had not encountered a cultivator at the same cultivation level as him yet. While the middle-aged divine general was paying attention to Wu Yala had just killed a stargrade cultivator. Seeing this, the middle-aged divine general's face and eyes did not show any unusual emotions. To him, this was a very normal thing. After Wu Yala killed 3 people in a row, the middle-aged divine general turned his attention to the surveillance screen of Yang Tian. When he saw the surveillance screen again, the middle-aged divine general's calm face finally showed a surprised expression. This was because when Yang Tian and Soli walked among the insectoids, the surrounding insectoids did not attack them. It was as if they were ignoring them. The middle-aged divine general was very knowledgeable, but he had never seen such a situation before. After watching for a while, the middle-aged divine general laughed. This was because he realized that Yang Tian's group and Wu Yala were actually getting closer and closer. What would happen when the time came? The middle-aged divine general was looking forward to it. Wu Yala's entire body was covered in black armor. His face could not be seen, but from his figure, one could tell that he was a big man more than 2 meters tall. His body was very strong and full of power. Before he was noticed by the staff on the spaceship, he had already started killing his own kind. In his opinion, this kind of assessment was really boring. It was like being played by the superstar divinity temple. After this round, he might be played again. The solution to this problem was very simple. He just had to kill everyone else. This way, if he was the only one left or a few people, the next round of the assessment would be meaningless. It had to be said that this was an extremely selfish way of thinking and doing things. However, he had the ability to do so. The ability to do whatever he wanted. As Wu Yala moved at high speed, he saw another stargrade cultivator. This was a cultivator wearing silver-white armor. When Wu Yala saw this person, he was also moving at high speed, avoiding the attacks of the insectoids. Wu Yala did not even say a word. His body moved and blocked in front of the silver-armored cultivator, punching him in the chest. A superstar realm cultivator was much stronger than a stargrade realm cultivator. Wu Yala's punch directly shattered the silver-white armor of the other party. The powerful force also shattered the other party's body. With just one punch, Wu Yala killed the silver-armored stargrade realm lord cultivator. At this moment, behind the black mask, Wu Yala sneered, his eyes emitting a ruthless light. Chapter 457. As soon as they left the valley, not only Soli, but even Yang Tian was a little nervous. It was not fear, but a novel excitement in his heart. A strange insect that looked like an octopus with a helmet on its head and 8 legs under its abdomen crawled toward them. This was a hatter that could spit extremely corrosive venom. Seeing this insect crawling over, Yang Tian and Soli both stopped and looked at each other. Both of them clenched their weapons, ready to kill this insect at any time. Fortunately, the insect stopped when it was about 10 meters away from Yang Tian's group and crawled to the side. This situation made both Yang Tian and Soli sigh in relief. The two of them continued forward. In order not to expose themselves, neither of them spoke. There were many insects. Almost every few steps forward, there would be an insect passing by. When there were no enemies or prey, these insects were very calm and leisurely. These insects seemed to be very easily hungry. As Yang Tian and Soli moved forward, most of the insects around them were gnawing on the black rocks on the ground. Because these rocks were rich in organic matter, there were also some metal minerals and water, which could provide energy for their activities. After walking for a few minutes, Yang Tian saw over 1,000 insects. If the density of insects on the entire planet was like this, it would not take long for the organic layer on the surface of the planet to be eaten up and more insects would be produced. When the food was digested, the insects would become chaotic and start to kill each other. At that time, migrating insects would be born. After walking for about half an hour, Yang Tian stopped on top of a small hill and took out the binoculars from his storage bracelet. Yang Tian used the binoculars to scan his surroundings. All he saw was a dense swarm of insects. There are not many insects in the valley yet. Because of the rune arrays, the insects would not approach. At this time, there were dozens of species of insects in Yang Tian's eyes. Some of them were as large as a hill, while others were as small as a fingertip. Because of the existence of these insects, the planet became full of vitality. It was a pity that he lacked plants. However, even if there were plants, they would probably be eaten up by these insects very soon. Putting down the binoculars, Yang made a hand gesture to Soli, expressing his intention to return. At this time, the sky was about to turn dark. Once the night was over, half a day would pass, and it would be time for the assessment. Sori nodded. Although she had the insect brain with her and would not be attacked by the insects, Soli still did not feel safe. She felt more comfortable staying in the rune array. The only fly in the ointment was that he felt a little uncomfortable after taking off his armor in the valley. The two of them had only taken a few steps when they suddenly stopped. The little blue dragon, who was lying on Yang Tian's shoulder, also turned around and looked behind Yang Tian. Its eyes were wide open and full of vigilance. The two men and one dragon all sensed a powerful energy fluctuation coming over. From this level of energy fluctuation, one could tell that it was a superstar. After the previous experience, Yang Tian understood that at any time, other cultivators were potential enemies to him. Yang Tian and Soli immediately turned around and looked in the direction of the powerful energy fluctuation. At this time, even without binoculars, they could see the situation ahead. There were two cultivators. One of them was wearing green armor and seemed to be running away, while the other was a strong black-armored cultivator chasing after him. In terms of realm, the green-armored cultivator was clearly inferior to the black-armored cultivator behind him. In just a few blinks of an eye, the black-armored cultivator caught up. Soon, the green-armored cultivator was killed by the black-armored cultivator. The whole process took less than a minute. This clearly showed the gap between the star realm and the superstar realm. After the green-armored cultivator was killed by the black-armored cultivator, the superstar black-armored cultivator disappeared in a flash. The green-armored cultivator on the ground was instantly drowned by the swarm of insects. Other people's killing had nothing to do with him. Yang Tian was about to leave with Soli when a black shadow suddenly flashed, and a tall, black-armored cultivator appeared dozens of meters away from them. An insect sensed the black-armored cultivator and immediately pounced over, but its body was kicked to pieces with a bang. The newcomer didn't come with good intentions. Yang Tian and Soli both frowned. They could clearly sense that the black-armored cultivator was full of hostility toward them. The newcomer was Wiala. After he killed another green-armored cultivator, he discovered Yang Tian and Soli. To him, the two were his next prey. After crushing an insect, Wiala sized up Yang Tian and Soli. Suddenly, he moved and rushed toward Yang Tian. Pong! Yang Tian was not someone a star-grade cultivator could compare to. Thus, he managed to block Wiala's punch. Their fists collided with a loud bang. From start to finish, Yang Tian remained standing on the same spot, while Wiala was forced to retreat dozens of steps before coming to a stop. When Yang Tian wasn't using origin power, he wouldn't emit a powerful aura. Only when he used his strength, now, did Wiala know his realm. He was actually a superstar realm cultivator. Wiala didn't expect that such an ordinary-looking cultivator was actually a superstar realm cultivator. The commotion of the battle immediately attracted a large number of insects. Yang Tian stared at Wiala, who had stopped, and said to Soli, "Stay away." Soli immediately nodded and flashed to the distance. Yang Tian shook his numb hand and said to Wiala with a smile, "Your strength isn't that great." When Wiala heard Yang Tian say this, although he couldn't see Yang Tian's face behind a mask, he could guess that Yang Tian had a disdainful smile on his face. His opponent was clearly one realm lower than him. How could he block his punch? Yang Tian's powerful strength surprised Wiala. One must know that Wu Yala was a superstar warrior rank cultivator, one rank higher than Yang Tian. The higher one's cultivation realm, the harder it was to advance. Correspondingly, the difference in combat power between small realms within a large realm was huge. Wuyala was angered by Yang Tian's words. He shouted in a deep voice and rushed toward Yang Tian again. "You're courting death." Seeing Wuyala rushing over again, Yang Tian dodged to the side. This was because the strange program told Yang Tian that it was going to experiment with a new project. What project? At this moment, the middle-aged divine general on the spaceship became excited. The situation he had been waiting for had finally happened. The two strongest people in the assessment this time had finally met. It wasn't just the middle-aged divine general. Even the other staff members had their eyes on the surveillance screen of the two people. Chapter 458. Wu Yala did not expect Yang Tian to dodge to the side when facing his second attack. Whoosh! The shriek was heard again. Before the shriek could be heard, Wu Yala's tall figure appeared in front of Yang Tian again and punched at Yang Tian's afterimage. Yang Tian dodged again. Yang Tian dodged again. He did not defend or attack. What was going on? On the spaceship, the crew members who wanted to watch an exciting battle were disappointed. Their cultivation realms were low, and they had never seen a battle between superstar realm cultivators. They wondered what it would be like. If Yang Tian was only dodging, what was the point of watching such a battle? Only the eyes of the middle-aged divine general were filled with interest. What he saw was not Wuyala attacking Yang Tian, but the bugs around the two. When Wuyala attacked Yang Tian, all the insects within a 100-mile radius and even further away swarmed towards the location where the two of them were gathered. There were even two Stargrade cultivators who had been surrounded by the bugs. They had been fighting fiercely against the bugs, trying their best to hold on. Unexpectedly, the fearless bugs had suddenly retreated like a receding tide. Then they surged in one direction. A large number of bugs even passed by them, some crawling on the ground and some flying in the sky. These bugs seemed to have been summoned by the leader of the bugs and ignored them. When they exchanged blows, Wuyala felt that Yang Tian's body contained a powerful force. Moreover, the attribute of the force was very strange. It was very destructive. At this time, Yang Tian kept dodging, which puzzled him. Did he use all his strength in the attack just now? Wuyala guessed. So, because he was very confident in his combat strength. What Wuyala did not know was that the bug brain controlled by a strange program in Yang Tian's body was constantly sending out summoning messages. This message spread to the entire planet at a speed several times faster than the speed of sound. If it were ordinary bugs, the ones that attack cultivators would be ignored. However, the strange program simulated the summoning of intelligent bugs. Qiqing had told Yang Tian before that although there were a large number of bugs on this planet, there were no intelligent bugs yet. However, there would be soon. Now, the strange program was sending out such a summons, which was equivalent to telling all the bugs that they already had a leader. There could only be one intelligent bug on a planet. Therefore, after the strange program became the leader of the bugs, no more intelligent bugs would be born. It would not be long before all the bugs on the planet gathered. This was also the experiment that the strange program had mentioned. It wanted to command these bugs to besiege Wuyala and use all the bugs on the planet to drown this superstar warrior. A large number of insects swarmed over. Wuyala did not notice them at first as he continued to attack Yang Tian. Towards the end, however, more and more insects gathered. Wuyala felt that something was wrong. This was because the arrival of the insects was beyond his imagination. This was definitely not a normal phenomenon. Moreover, many of the insects were attacking Wuyala, ignoring Yang Tian Do. It looked as though Yang Tian was commanding the insects to fight. Interesting. On the spaceship, the middle-aged divine general saw this scene and murmured with a smile. Now, everyone could see this strange situation. It was as if Wuyala had angered all the bugs on the planet. On the spaceship, a staff member who saw the situation below said faintly, "This is really karma." Although killing other cultivators in this kind of assessment was not against the rules, it was still considered shameful by many people. Hearing this, the middle-aged divine general acted as if he did not hear it. It was not that Yang Tian could not defeat Yala. He kept dodging because of the experiment that the strange program had mentioned. The strange program did not say anything, but Yang Tian already knew. After dodging several times, Yang Tian no longer needed to dodge. This was because Yala was already surrounded by a large number of bugs. Whether it was on the ground or in the sky, there were bugs everywhere. The bugs flying in the sky even covered the light of the stars, making the light on the ground look like the last moment of night. Boom, boom, boom. After all, he was a superstar state powerhouse. It was not that easy for the bugs to kill him. Surrounded by the bugs, Yala quickly punched out. As soon as the fierce power was unleashed, there was a loud bang, and a large number of bugs were killed. At this time, Yang Tian was already a few hundred meters away from the battlefield between Yala and the bugs. In order to see clearly, Yang Tian even took out his binoculars. At this time, Soli also came to Yang Tian's side and watched all this with wide eyes. No matter how she thought about it, she could not understand how this could happen. The bugs killed by Yala were quickly eaten clean by their own kind. As Yala moved, the bugs' corpses could not be seen. After about 10 minutes, Yala realized that if he continued killing like this, he did not know when it would end. Thus, he prepared to leave. If he could not kill all the bugs, he could at least escape. At present, it seemed that these bugs were not a threat to Yala, who was a superstar warlord. With Yala's speed, even if he could not defeat the bugs would not be able to stop him if he wanted to leave. However, apart from the bugs, there was also Yang Tian. Yang Tian, who had been paying attention to Yala's movements, quickly noticed that Yala was about to escape. Boom, boom, boom. A series of loud bangs came. Yala used the strong wind from his fists to create a passage in the bug wall, surrounding him in a few blinks of an eye. Then, a black figure flashed and fled into the distance. At this time, Yala's face was full of anger. If he saw Yang Tian again, because it was Yang Tian who had caused him to be surrounded by the bugs. Just as he thought of the cultivator in blue armor, a blue figure appeared in front of Yala's eyes. Dying. Seeing Yang Tian appear in front of him, Yala roared and rushed toward Yang Tian. Yang Tian did not dodge this time. Boom, boom, boom. It seemed that Yala's most powerful combat technique was his pair of fists. Yang Tian did not dodge. In the blink of an eye, he exchanged dozens of blows with Yala. Whether it was strength or speed, Yang Tian was not inferior to Yala. This was because Yang Tian's force world was much wider than the energy world in the body of an ordinary cultivator. The strength he possessed was naturally several times that of others. At the same time, due to his powerful mind power, his nerve reaction speed was also faster than others. While Yang Tian was blocking Yala, the bugs surrounded him again. That person's actions don't seem to be of any use. The bugs can't threaten that person. In the spaceship, a beautiful woman with long blue hair frowned and said, Chapter 459. Boom, boom, boom. While Yang Tian and Yala were fighting, a shocking commotion could be heard in the surroundings, causing the ground to tremble. It turned out that a large number of large insects had arrived. Most of them were the black star insects that were more than 10 meters long. These large insects formed a large circle with a diameter of several kilometers and then stopped. The gaps between them were immediately filled by small insects. Countless of these large insects formed a circle of walls. Even higher up were the flying insects. They were flying in circles above the giant insect's head. At this time, if one looked from the outside, the encirclement formed by the insects looked like a huge yurt. As more insects arrived, the yurt became bigger and thicker. The light from outside could no longer penetrate the yurt. It became dark. Before the encirclement was formed, Yala tried his best to escape. However, he was stopped by Yang Tian time and time again, until the encirclement was completely formed. Due to the flying insects flying around this large area, the airflow in the encirclement began to flow rapidly, causing the small rocks on the ground to be rolled up. Pung! In the darkness, Yang Tian and Wyala exchanged a punch again. Using the force of the impact, he flew back and disappeared from Wyala's perception. As long as Yang Tian did not use the power in his body, the aura he emitted was not as strong as the aura of a large insect. The encirclement formed by the insects was, of course, controlled by the strange program. At this moment, the strange program and the insect brain were like a host computer with a large amount of computing power. And each insect was equivalent to a terminal. Countless insects were controlled by the strange program. They were under the command of the strange program. Yang Tian retreated to the edge of the insect wall. The insects in front of him took the initiative to open up a passage. Yang Tian followed the passage formed by the insects and left the encirclement. It was dark inside, but the sky outside was still bright. He wondered how he would deal with it this time. Yang Tian laughed in his heart. If it were not for the experiment of the strange program, Yang Tian would have killed Wyala a long time ago. All the insects on the planet had gathered. For the other cultivators, it was undoubtedly a good thing. In just 2 days, more than 200 cultivators had died. At least half of the cultivators were killed by Wyala. Many cultivators followed him and looked curiously at the big ball formed by the insects. They did not understand what had happened. Why did the insects suddenly give up on attacking them and gather here? Of course, it was not easy to kill a superstar realm cultivator. When Yang Tian left the encirclement of the insects, boom! There was a loud sound. A powerful force exploded. It was like a small bomb. The swarm of insects that surrounded Wyala suddenly expanded like a bubble. Wyala used his strongest attack. This kind of large-scale attack consumed a lot of energy, but the effect was very obvious. A large number of insects were killed by this attack. They flew into the air and fell like raindrops. The insects had the instinct to eat the corpses of their own kind. With so many insects dead, the encirclement was thrown into chaos. Boom! There was another loud sound. A powerful force burst out from the encirclement that had become loose and created a path for the insects. Next, Wyala rushed out from the path. What that person is doing doesn't seem to work. The insect swarm can't threaten that person. In the spaceship, this was the words of a beautiful, blue-haired staff member. After a long while, the middle-aged god general finally replied, "Don't think that the insect's attack is so simple. They only rely on their claws and teeth. These low-intelligence fellows have terrifying evolutionary abilities. They've already evolved to target the attacking organs of cultivators." After Wyala broke out from the encirclement, he quickly fled into the distance. Usually, those who were cruel to others were also very afraid of death. Wyala was such a person. Just now, he could already feel that the number of insects was about to reach the point where he could not handle it. Therefore, he paid the price of minor injuries and finally broke out of the encirclement. Seeing Wyala escape, Soli, who was standing next to Yang Tian, thought that Yang Tian would chase after him and stall him again. However, Yang Tian did not do so. Instead, he had a strange smile on his face. Yang Tian did not chase after him because the strange program had told him in advance. The strange program's experiment project had not been completed yet. From the beginning until now, Wyala was just a test subject for the strange program. The reason why Yang Tian stopped Wyala was because this test subject was too powerful. The strange program had to ask Yang Tian for help. Otherwise, Wyala would have escaped long ago. If Wyala had not attacked Yang Tian would not have agreed to the strange program's request to use Wyala as a test subject. This was what people meant when they said that one would not die if one did not seek death. Once one sought death, one would not be far from death. As soon as the middle-aged god general finished speaking, Wyala, who was already far away from the insect swarm, suddenly stopped. This was a very strange thing. Why did he suddenly stop? Was he not afraid that Yang Tian would catch up to him again? The staff on the spaceship immediately zoomed in on Wyala's image. At this moment, Wyala's whole body was trembling slightly. His body also seemed very stiff. Wyala was wearing a helmet, so his expression could not be seen. However, Everyone could guess that Wiala must be feeling very uncomfortable right now. The middle-aged god general said, "The insects can change their body structure according to the environment and the enemy, producing special organs. In the process of Wiala's battle with the insects have already captured the energy frequency in his body." While the middle-aged god general was speaking, Wiala suddenly struggled to take off his helmet, revealing a ferocious face as he roared at the sky. At this moment, the energy in his body was on the verge of going out of control. Only Wiala himself could sense that strange energy waves were coming from all directions. They easily entered his body and formed a strange resonance with the energy in his body. The energy waves that affected Wiala were emitted from some special insects. They were about the size of a human finger and were black in color. They were shaped like ladybugs on Earth. They had 2 long antennae on their heads. At this moment, the antennae on the heads of the insects surrounding Wiala were moving rhythmically. From their antennae, a strange energy wave was emitted. These energy waves were not very strong when they were emitted from one insect. However, what about hundreds of thousands or millions of them? The amount of energy that was gathered was extremely terrifying. Chapter 460. As a superstar realm powerhouse, Wiala naturally wouldn't admit defeat so easily. He roared at the sky, venting his pain. He began to reverse the energy in his body. This was an extremely dangerous move, but it was also his only way. Once he succeeded, Wiala would be able to regain his mobility very quickly. This was a process that sounded simple in theory, but was extremely complicated in practice. Yang Tian vaguely understood what Wiala was trying to do. For example, in Yang Tian's origin realm, the planets all rotated in one direction. If Yang Tian wanted to change the frequency of his energy, he would have to use his mind to make all the planets rotate in the opposite direction. It was much more difficult for Yang Tian to do this compared to others. Of course, he would not encounter the situation that Wiala was facing now. That was because Yang Tian had several types of energy in his body. Using one of them, he could block the energy waves of the bugs. Unless the bugs could decode all the energy frequencies in his body at once. In fact, it would take a long time for the bugs on a planet to decode the energy frequencies of a superstar L powerhouse. It was not something that could be done in a short 1 or 2 days. The reason for this situation was that the bugs on the planet had been modified by the superstar god temple. Another reason was that the strange program was controlling these bugs. Through the bug brain, the strange program knew the inherited information of the bug race. With its terrifying computing power, it could decode the energy frequencies of a cultivator in an extremely short amount of time. When a strange program directed the bugs to quickly approach Wiala, Wiala had already succeeded. Now that he could move, Wiala immediately fled further away. At this moment, the strange program suddenly said to Yang Tian, "The experiment is over." Yang Tian was surprised. He thought that the strange program would not stop until it killed that person. Knowing what Yang Tian was thinking, the strange program said, "The experiment just now was only to determine if the inherited information of the bug race was useful. If you encounter such a situation later, I can save you from being attacked by the bugs." The strange program had ended its experiment, but Yang Tian would not let Wiala go. This person attacked him without saying a word. If he didn't take revenge, Yang Tian wouldn't be happy. Yang Tian knew that the person who escaped would definitely suffer for a long time. Compared to before, his strength would also decrease by at least 50%. It would be too easy to kill this person. Yang Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and his figure moved, disappearing on the spot. With Yang Tian's current speed, he could catch up to Wiala in a few minutes. After the experiment was over, the strange program no longer controlled these insects. When the cultivators nearby saw the mountain-like insect swarm spread out in all directions, they were greatly alarmed and immediately turned to flee. In the blink of an eye, Wiala had traveled several kilometers and arrived at the back of a small mountain. "Phew, After finally escaping the attack of the insect swarm and the blue-armored cultivator, Weala leaned against a huge rock and stopped. He let out a long breath. The temperature was very high, but he had a relaxed expression on his face as he held his helmet. Although his whole body was tingling with pain, it was constantly stimulating his consciousness. At that moment, a light red superparticle beam as thick as an arm shot toward Weala. Weala couldn't react in time, and the superparticle beam hit him in the chest. This superparticle beam didn't cause any harm to Weala. It didn't even break the armor on his body. In fact, this energy beam was originally aimed at his head. When Weala sensed the danger, he moved slightly. The one who fired the superparticle beam at Weala was a cultivator at the stellar realm wearing red armor. When he saw that the attack didn't hurt Weala, he immediately threw away the portable particle cannon in his hand and gripped the sword in his hand tightly. For a stellar realm cultivator, if he couldn't injure an expert like Weala with one attack, he wouldn't have a second chance. It would even be difficult for him to escape. As expected, Weala's body flashed, and in the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of the stellar realm cultivator. This was a female cultivator. One could tell just by looking at her figure. Looking at the female cultivator in front of him, Weala sneered coldly. He had a belly full of anger, and it was a good opportunity to vent it on this woman. Of course, under such circumstances and under the surveillance of the spaceship, Weala wasn't going to do anything dirty. Instead, he was going to let this female cultivator die a horrible death. You killed my husband. I'll kill you too. The female cultivator looked at Weala, who was less than 10 meters away from her, and took off her helmet. This female cultivator was a middle-aged woman with a head of light yellow curly hair. After taking off her helmet, one could see the determination on her face. Bang! Just as Weala was about to make his move, a blue shadow descended from the sky. It was very fast, and Weala was stomped into the hard rock layer. Even the ground shook violently. Everything happened too suddenly. By the time the female cultivator reacted, she realized that a cultivator in blue armor was stepping on Weala's chest. Weala's body had sunk more than a foot deep into the rock layer. An attack of this level wouldn't be able to seriously injure Weala. However, with Yang Tian stepping on his chest, he couldn't move at all. Bang, bang, bang. Weala used all his strength to slap Yang Tian's feet. However, before his palms could even touch the armor on Yang Tian's legs, they were blocked by the energy on the surface of the armor. This was the top-grade armor that Yang Tian had exchanged for with 100 million credits. Coupled with the modifications from the Strange program, it was not something that any ordinary armor could compare to. Kill him. Yang Tian turned around and said to the female cultivator. The female cultivator was stunned. Then, she picked up the particle cannon from the ground, walked forward, and aimed the cannon that was thicker than her arm at Weala's head. In order to prevent any accidents, the female cultivator immediately pressed the button to fire. This shot did not manage to blow Weala's head off. That was because Weala's body was covered with powerful energy. It was very difficult to kill a superstar realm cultivator. If the first shot did not work, then she would fire again. At this time, Yang Tian raised his head. He didn't want to look at his feet anymore. For a superstar realm elite, this kind of death was a little cowardly. However, this was what Weala deserved. After being hit dozens of times, Weala's head was finally blown apart. Only then did Yang Tian let go of his feet and left. The female cultivator in red armor saw a large number of insects swarming over. She glanced at Weala's squirming body, laughed coldly, and left as well. Weala's body that was reforming was soon surrounded by insects. Chapter 461. Sir, someone is using a spaceship. On the spaceship, a worker saw what was happening on the screen and immediately reported to the middle-aged god general. Almost all the insects were gathered together. Some of the cultivators who were attacked by the insects had already taken out spaceships from their storage bracelets, wanting to leave this planet before the insects could spread. As for the exam, What was the point of the exam if they were dead? The middle-aged god general only glanced at the spaceships that were about to take off and said calmly, "Destroy them." Boom! As soon as Yang Tian returned to where Soli was, a silver-white spaceship that had just taken off was destroyed by a red beam of light. Yang Tian and the others only saw one spaceship being destroyed. In truth, far away, some of the spaceships had not even taken off yet. As soon as the cultivators entered the spaceship, they were already shattered into pieces. Looking at the destroyed spaceship on the screen, the middle-aged god general sneered. It's too late to give up now. For Yang Tian and the others, time passed by very quickly. After one night and another half a day, the exam was finally over. Some small spaceships descended from the sky and spread out, landing in front of the cultivators who were still alive. These spaceships were all simple flat triangles. What surprised Yang Tian was that these spaceships were not attacked by the insects when they landed. The strange program told Yang Tian that these spaceships were emitting energy waves that made the insects uncomfortable. There was also a smell. Yang Tian and Soli immediately boarded the spaceship. The spaceship took off and flew out of the atmosphere in a few minutes, entering the large spaceship. All the cultivators who participated in the exam once again returned to the cabin where they came from. Pung! After the cabin door was closed, a cultivator took off his helmet and slammed it on the alloy floor of the cabin. It was a middle-aged man, and he looked very angry. After throwing down the helmet, the man gritted his teeth and said, "I don't want to participate in the next exam. The past 3 days have been torturous enough. What kind of exam was this? This was a prank. I don't want to participate in the next assessment either." Another short-haired young man took off his helmet and said indifferently, "More than 400 people had gone down to take part in this test, but as the middle-aged immortal general had said, less than 50% of them had returned. Wu Yala had killed more than 100 star-grade cultivators. What if Yala didn't kill? If that was the case, the number of people who returned would still be the same. This was because the strange program had summoned insects when many cultivators were about to give up, giving them a chance to catch their breath. After Wu Yala was killed, other than the cultivators who were destroyed along with the spaceship, no one else died. Almost 30 cultivators gave up on the next test. Suddenly, the cabin door opened. The middle-aged divine general walked in with a smile. He first glanced at the crowd and said, "Those who have given up on the next assessment, please leave the spaceship immediately and return to the Superstar Academy." With that, the middle-aged divine general turned sideways and made an inviting gesture. A total of 35 people left the resting cabin one after another. There was a teleportation array disk on the spaceship, and they would return to the Superstar Academy through it. Everyone knew that if they gave up like this, they would be blacklisted by the Superstar Divinity Temple. In the future, they would be cut off from their jobs in the temple. After the 35 people left, the middle-aged divine general smiled and said, "Do you know why you accepted this test?" No one answered this question. The middle-aged divine general glanced at the crowd and said, "The jobs in the temple are not as easy as you think. As a divine general, you will encounter difficulties at any time, and many of the missions will require you to risk your life to complete them. If you are afraid of this, then you are not qualified to take any jobs in the temple, not even qualified to be a soldier." The more the middle-aged divine general spoke, the colder his voice became. Hearing this, many people frowned. They yearned for the jobs in the Superstar Divinity Temple because they could earn a lot of money by working there. Even an ordinary divine general could earn a salary of tens of millions of star crystals every year, not to mention the rewards after completing some missions. After the middle-aged divine general finished speaking, he was silent for a moment before continuing. This time, among the 5 divine generals, the chief divine general will be sent to the 9 barbarian star zone. It is a job with a mortality rate of more than 90%. But at the same time, the rewards are also great. At this point, the middle-aged divine general smiled again and raised a finger. You will be rewarded with 100 million star crystals every year. At the same time, you will also receive a beast core that is higher than your current level. This reward is generous, right? The mission is also very simple. You just need to maintain the connection between the 9 barbarian star zone and the outside world. Even if you kill everyone in the star zone, as long as you can guarantee this, the temple will not blame you. Hearing this, many people's eyes lit up. As the saying goes, people die for wealth, and birds die for food. This was the truth. This kind of reward made many people forget the 90% mortality rate that the middle-aged divine general had mentioned before. Everyone wanted to be in the 10%. Not only would they not die, but they could also earn a lot of cultivation resources. The rewards from the Superstar Divinity Temple were secondary. The resources produced in the 9 barbarian star zone were the most important. What about the duties of the other 4 divine generals? After the middle-aged divine general stirred up the emotions in the resting cabin, someone asked after a while. The middle-aged divine general smiled and said, 2 of the other 4 divine generals will be sent by the temple to guard a star zone. The other 2 will stay in the temple. After saying this, the middle-aged divine general turned around and said indifferently, "Prepare for the next test." This time, the middle-aged divine general did not say what the next test was. After saying this, the middle-aged divine general left. As soon as he left, the people in the resting cabin began to discuss. Some people were talking about the previous test and how the results would be determined. Some people were talking about the production of the 9 barbarian star zone. Some people were guessing about the next test. Yang Tian did not want to compete for the position of chief divine general. What he wanted was to stay in the temple. Needless to say, Yang Tian knew that he had performed very well in the first test. Then, he could not stand out anymore. Otherwise, it would not be good if he was sent to the 9 barbarian star zone. As everyone guessed, the spaceship flew for an entire day. After several space jumps and a large-scale teleportation, they finally arrived at their destination. When Yang Tian and the others got off the spaceship, they found that they had been sent to the Superstar Divinity Temple. This was the first time that Yang Tian felt close to Qin Fei since entering the universe. Chapter 462. This was a mystical palace floating in the universe. The star field where this palace was located was extremely beautiful. It was surrounded by spiral-shaped, 5-color galaxies. They were like individual stars that floated above the palace, casting a mystical light onto the palace, making it seem like a dream. Yang Tian knew that this was the Superstar Divine General because someone beside him exclaimed in surprise, "This is the Superstar Divine Temple." The middle-aged divine general who followed him down the spaceship smiled and nodded. The next test was held in the Superstar Divine Palace, which surprised everyone. Some of them felt pity for the 35 people who had left earlier. If they hadn't given up, they could have at least walked around the Superstar Divine Temple. The huge spaceship stopped beside the lowest platform of the Superstar Divine Temple. After getting off the spaceship, everyone stood on this wide platform and looked around curiously. Although the scenery was very beautiful, Yang Tian suddenly had an urge to destroy this temple. This was probably because Qin Fei was under house arrest here. This was Qin Fei's cage. Including Yang Tian, a total of 192 people got off the spaceship. The staff members on the spaceship didn't have the right to enter the Superstar Divine Temple, so they looked at Yang Tian and the others enviously before driving the spaceship away. Let me introduce myself. I'm Brilliant Star Guna, a mid-level divine general of the Superstar Divine Temple. The middle-aged divine general introduced himself. At this time, the middle-aged divine general said his name. Brilliant Star Guna seemed to be very famous. As soon as he said this, someone exclaimed in surprise, "You're Brilliant Star Guna!" Brilliant Star Guna didn't respond to this person's surprise. Instead, he said indifferently, "The process of your first test has been recorded. Together with the rest of the test, the priest will give you a fair evaluation." After saying this, Brilliant Star Guna turned around and walked toward the stone stairs in front of him. This platform was the lowest point of the Superstar Divine Temple. Looking up, there was an endless stretch of palaces that extended upward with no end in sight. It was simply too spectacular. Although this was a building built in space, it had gravity and was surrounded by a layer of gas. The temperature was also comfortable for humans. It would be great if they could live here for a long time. These were the thoughts of the majority of the people who had come to participate in the assessment. Everyone followed behind Brilliance Star Guna as they ascended the wide stone steps. The Superstar Divine Temple was a dignified place. On both sides of the stone steps, every few steps, there were two divine temple soldiers wearing black armor and holding long spears. These soldiers stood there motionlessly like statues. As they walked forward, everyone looked curiously at the situation on both sides. After several hundred steps, there were several palace-like buildings on both sides. At the gates of these palaces, there were tall sculptures of strange beasts, and 2 rows of tall temple soldiers stood in front of the gates. There was no signboard above the palace gates, and he had no idea where these palaces were. Yang Tian guessed that it should be the residence of a divine general. Whether it was on Earth or in the universe, the height of the terrain represented one's status. In the Superstar Divine Temple, only divine generals were qualified to live in the palace, and they were also located in the lowest place. The bluestone stairs extended upwards at a fixed angle. After passing through the first level of the palace, there was a forest on both sides. One could vaguely see buildings like pavilions. After another few dozen steps, there were even higher levels of palaces on both sides. At this time, if one looked down from the highest point of the Superstar Divine Temple, they would see that the entire Superstar Divine Temple was shaped like an irregular cone. The lower level had the most palaces, and it was indeed the residence of the divine generals. The higher they went, the more intricate and large the palaces looked. The bluestone stairs that Yang Tian and the others were walking on were one of the 3 main paths from the bottom to the top of the Superstar Divine Temple. In other words, there were 3 such bluestone stairs evenly distributed on this huge cone. In the middle of these layers of palaces, there were some wide, open spaces. Some cultivators from the Divine Temple could even be seen sparring there. These open spaces were protected by talisman arrays, so the overflowing energy would not destroy the surrounding trees and buildings. After walking for half a day, Yang Tian and the others finally arrived at a wide open space in the middle of the Superstar Divine Temple under Brilliance Star Guna's guidance. This was a rectangular space that was more than 100 meters long and 60 to 70 meters wide. The ground was also paved with bluestone. Dozens of old men sat around this space. These old men all exuded powerful auras. After arriving, Brilliant Star Guna bowed to these people and said, "Greetings, priests. I have brought them here." Priests were the group of people with the highest status in the Superstar Divine Temple. When they heard Brilliant Star Guna say that these people were shamans, some of the cultivators who came with Yang Tian and the rest to participate in the test became nervous. The concept of hierarchy among cultivators was deeply rooted in people's hearts. This was the mentality of a small person meeting a big person. Even Soli was a little nervous. Yang Tian did not feel that these people were anything special. Given some time, he would be able to surpass every single shaman here. As soon as Brilliance Star Guna finished speaking, the people participating in the test took off their helmets. Sensing the powerful auras around them, the little blue dragon had already opened its eyes and looked at these old men curiously. While the others bowed, Yang Tian held up his helmet and looked at these priests impudently. There were 49 people in total. Yang Tian did not know any of these people. In fact, he really wanted to see Qin Fei right now. As the goddess of the Superstar Divine Temple, she should know about this, right? Yang Tian frowned as he thought. Just as Yang Tian was thinking about Qin Fei, suddenly, a group of white-robed maids surrounded a beautiful woman and walked over from the other side of the space. Seeing the beautiful woman in the middle, Yang Tian was stunned for a moment before he smiled. The surrounding priests immediately stood up from their seats and bowed respectfully. Although the goddess did not have any power in the temple, she had a supreme status. Even the great priests had to bow when they saw her, let alone these priests who were a level lower than the great priests. Even the priests bowed, let alone the cultivators participating in the test. They all bowed extremely low. Only Yang Tian stood with a joyful smile on his face. "Hey, hurry up and bow to the goddess." Seeing that Yang Tian was not moved, Brilliant Star Guna reminded Yang Tian in a dissatisfied and low voice. How could he bow to his wife? Yang Tian shook his head and refused. Chapter 463. Everyone bowed, and Yang Tian stood out like a crane among chickens. Their eyes met, and in that instant, countless emotions were transmitted to each other. Excitement, longing, joy, cough. Just as the two of them were staring at each other, a cough suddenly sounded from behind Qin Fei. The sound was obviously made on purpose to interrupt Yang Tian and Qin Fei's staring. After Qin Fei woke up, she elegantly raised her hand. Only then did everyone straighten up. "Greetings, great priestess." The one who coughed was Hong Yujio. As soon as he appeared with his cane, the priestesses bowed again. This was supposed to be an ordinary test, but they did not expect the two bigwigs of the temple to be here. Although Hong Yujio had not been promoted to the position of great priestess for long, he was already a great priestess, and the other priestesses of his age did not dare to disrespect him. Hong Yujio raised his cane and looked at Yang Tian. Not long ago, Yang Tian had not even left the Death Star field, but now he had become a superstar realm expert. Hong Yujio could not help but sigh in his heart. At the same time, he was also alarmed. If Yang Tian was allowed to continue growing, perhaps no one in the temple would be able to stop him in the future. At that time, if Yang Tian were to take this lady goddess away, it would definitely be a huge loss of face for Superstar Divine Temple. He had to think of a way to get rid of him. As soon as this thought appeared, Hong Yujio's heart trembled. He suddenly thought of the black-robed masked man. Hong Yujio's ability to read people was his specialty, and no one could compare to him. When he saw Yang Tian and Qin Fei's expressions, he could guess what would happen in the future. However, as soon as he thought of the black-robed masked man who had stopped him, Hong Yujio felt powerless. He gave up all thoughts of Yang Tian in his heart. He would just let nature take its course in the future. Perhaps because she was going to meet Yang Tian, Qin Fei wore a white dress and high heels similar to those on Earth. Her long black hair was casually let down, and she looked very natural and pure. Needless to say, the white dress and high heels she was wearing were definitely from Fei Fei. Even the goddess of the Superstar Divine Temple was wearing this kind of brand. This was a huge advertisement. The white-robed maid, Larry, brought over an exquisite chair for Qin Fei. After Qin Fei sat down, the priests also sat down. Hong Yujio stood silently at the side. Whoosh! Suddenly, a green shadow flashed, and a little blue dragon left Yang Tian's shoulder and landed in Qin Fei's arms. Seeing this, many priests were shocked and immediately stood up. If the goddess was harmed, they would not be able to bear the consequences. However, when they saw that Hong Yujio wasn't doing anything, they all sat down. Yang Tian and Qin Fei both had black hair that was unique to humans on Earth. This made people think that the two of them came from the same place and were of the same race. At this time, Yang Tian's pet beast ran into the arms of the goddess and appeared to be very close. The relationship between the two was not normal. Apart from Soli and Hong Yujio, no one else knew that Yang Tian and the goddess were lovers. Qin Fei held the little blue dragon and patted its head with a smile. The little blue dragon seemed to be enjoying this as well. Since when did the domineering little blue dragon become so gentle? Seeing this, Soli felt sour in her heart. What she didn't know was that apart from Yang Tian, Qin Fei was the closest human being to the little blue dragon. The little blue dragon stayed in Qin Fei's arms for a while before it returned to Yang Tian's shoulder. The little one brought back a scent that Yang Tian was familiar with. In a hall like this, Yang Tian and Qin Fei couldn't openly flirt with each other or do anything out of the ordinary. The two of them only looked at each other from time to express their inner feelings. Glorious Star Guna walked to the center of the hall and announced loudly, "The next round of assessment begins now." The process is very simple. The 10 people with the strongest combat power and the results of the previous round will be evaluated. The 5 people with the highest scores will become the 5 divine generals of the superstar pantheon. Honey, what's my rank? Yang Tian looked at Qin Fei and asked while Glorious Star Guna was explaining the rules. Of course, he only mouthed the words and didn't make any sound. The language he used was also Mandarin Chinese from Earth. Through this method, the two of them could communicate across space. This was something that Yang Tian did on a whim. He didn't know if Qin Fei could tell. After Yang Tian finished speaking, Qin Fei pursed her lips and smiled. Of course, she knew what Yang Tian meant. She felt that Yang Tian was still as cute as before. Yang Tian's behavior was like a man who wanted to show off in front of the girl he liked. Qin Fei curled her lips and said, "Of course I'll be first." Qin Fei didn't make any sound. At this moment, Yang Tian felt his blood suddenly boil. Professor Shenwu's warning and the dangers of the 9 Barbarian Star Zone were all thrown out of his mind. As soon as Glorious Star Guna finished speaking, Yang Tian walked to the center of the hall and looked at the 100 or so cultivators participating in the assessment. He said calmly, "Who wants to go first? Or all of you can go together." Although he had communicated with Qin Fei before, Yang Tian still heard the rules that Glorious Star Guna explained clearly. To put it bluntly, it was a challenge system. Those who were confident could go first. If they were defeated, they could stand aside. If they won, they could stay where they were. In this kind of challenge, those who went first would be at a great disadvantage. Energy consumption was one thing, but at the same time, other people could see their flaws in the process of battle. Yang Tian was the first to step up. Glorious Star Guna was surprised. Although Yang Tian had defeated Wu Yala in the previous assessment, he could tell that Yang Tian wasn't someone who liked to show off. Why would he be the first to step up now? What he didn't know was that Yang Tian's male hormones were already overflowing. Roar with a dragon's roar, the little blue dragon transformed into a dragon more than 10 meters long and landed next to Yang Tian. There was no rule against using pet beasts in this kind of competition. In front of Qin Fei, the little blue dragon wanted to show off. A superstar cultivator and a superstar pet beast combined their combat power wasn't as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. After a long time, no one went up. Besides Yang Tian, there were 4 other superstar cultivators among the 100 or so people. Since these 4 people didn't move, the other Stargrade cultivators didn't dare to be the first to go up. The appearance of 1 man and 1 dragon was tantamount to intimidating everyone. Everyone knew that even if they went up, they wouldn't be able to beat Yang Tian and the little blue dragon. It was better not to go up and embarrass themselves. As for everyone going up together, that was just nonsense. If they really did that, Yang Tian's image would be even greater in the eyes of the priests. Pet beasts can't participate in this assessment, Hong Yuzhou suddenly said when he saw the awkward silence. Chapter 464. Hong Yuzhou was the one with the most authority here. Of course, he had the right to make the decision. No one objected to his decision. Yang Tian didn't think there was anything wrong with it. With his current strength, even if the little blue dragon couldn't help him, getting first place wouldn't be a problem at all. Roar! Yang Tian didn't say anything, but the little blue dragon roared at Hong Yuzhou to express its dissatisfaction. It also wanted to show off its strength in front of Qin Fei. Faced with the little blue dragon's roar, Hong Yuzhou only lowered his eyelids as if he was dozing off, ignoring the little blue dragon. The little blue dragon knew that it couldn't change Hong Yuzhou's decision, so it turned back into a mini dragon and ran into Qin Fei's arms. Without the help of a super-level pet beast, the other cultivators were eager to give it a try. To them, this was a fair fight. After the little blue dragon left, a super-level cultivator in black armor walked out and stood 20 meters away from Yang Tian. This person was tall and had light blue short hair. He had a plain face and looked like a man in his 30s. Of course, this was only judging from the age of an ordinary person on Earth. In reality, this person could be hundreds or thousands of years old. Qin Fei's arrival not only made Yang Tian extremely excited, but it also made the other male cultivators who were participating in the assessment very excited. This was almost an instinct of male creatures. Even if they couldn't get it, they would try their best to show off. No one wanted to lose face in front of beauty, right? Hello, my name is Kista, super-level warrior. After standing still, this person in black armor reported his name and realm to Yang Tian. After saying that, he glanced at Qin Fei. Kista said this because he hoped that the goddess would notice him. Yang Tian, super-level warrior, Yang Tian said calmly. They were one level apart. Without the help of the little blue dragon, many people didn't think that Yang Tian would win. Apart from Yang Tian, there were 4 other superstar realm cultivators. Wu Yala, who was the strongest, had already died. Among the remaining 100 or so people, the one with the highest realm was Kista. Therefore, after he was confident that he could defeat Yang Tian, he was the first to step forward. In this kind of battle, there was no limit to life and death. However, as long as one admitted defeat, the opponent could no longer kill. This was something that Brilliant Star Guna had announced earlier. After both of them said their names and realms, Kista put on his helmet and waved his right hand. A strange weapon appeared in his hand. It was a flexible whip that could be extended, similar to the one Soli used. The handle in his hand was about 2 meters long and had a triangular spike at the end. The body of the whip was about 1.5 meters long, and it was made of thin, silver-white threads. It was unknown what material it was made of. At the head of the whip was a silver-white hook that looked like a big fish hook. Seeing Kista take out such a weapon, Yang Tian immediately became vigilant. Back when he was still a martialist on Earth, he had a battle with Fengde, something that Yang Tian could still remember clearly. It must be noted that people who used strange weapons had very strange attacking methods. Yang Tian also put on his helmet. He waved his right hand, and a long red saber appeared in his hand. After both of them took out their weapons, Yang Tian and Kista's auras suddenly became fierce. The rune arrays in this area were also activated immediately to prevent the powerful energy from overflowing during the battle and causing damage to other cultivators and buildings not far away. For their realms, this battle area was actually a bit narrow. The two of them were very fast, surpassing the speed of sound. In the case of a high-speed battle, it was actually equivalent to a close-quarters fight. However, the advantage was that the outcome could be determined very quickly. As soon as the rune arrays were activated, both of them felt that they were covered by a layer of invisible energy. Even the ground was covered by a layer of invisible energy. This made Yang Tian feel as if he was stepping on smooth ice. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Under the infusion of origin power, the saber in Yang Tian's hand began to tremble. In a battle between experts, perhaps the outcome could be determined in an instant. However, before the battle started, it was very long for the spectators. At this moment, Qin Fei stared at Yang Tian, her left hand clenched into a fist. The little blue dragon felt Qin Fei's nervous expression and scratched her right palm with its claws. It was very confident that Yang Tian could defeat that opponent. Qin Fei's current realm was already at the planet domain lord level, and her cultivation speed was extremely fast. However, she had yet to experience actual combat. She had very little experience in real battles, so of course she was nervous for Yang Tian. As for the chief divine general guarding the 9 barbarian star zone, she naturally knew. Then why did she want Yang Tian to take first place? Because this was the only way she could meet Yang Tian alone. Under everyone's gaze, Yang Tian and Kista finally moved. Then there was a bang sound. Yang Tian's saber slashed at Kista's weapon, and the rebounding force caused the two of them to bounce back quickly. This was only a probing attack. In the eyes of the priests, Yang Tian and Kista's movements could be seen clearly. This was because their nerve reaction speed could completely capture the trajectory of the two's movements. However, in Qin Fei's eyes, Yang Tian and Kista seemed to have teleported. They suddenly crashed into each other and flew back quickly, leaving behind afterimages. The space for the battle was very small. After the two of them separated, they naturally wouldn't give each other a chance to react. The moment they stopped, the two of them rushed toward each other again. They were separated by dozens of meters, but after a single move, the distance between them was less than 5 meters. At this moment, Kista finally used his strange attack method. The weapon in his hand suddenly elongated, wriggling in the air like a snake to attack Yang Tian. Yang Tian dodged sideways, but the curve hook at the tip of the weapon instantly turned and attacked the back of Yang Tian's neck. At the same time, the long whip in Kista's hand also quickly changed direction and stabbed Yang Tian's chest. This kind of instantaneous and continuous attack was equivalent to the two of them attacking Yang Tian. Yang Tian had long known the possible attack method of Kista's weapon. Sensing the hook attacking the back of his neck, he lowered his head and dodged, at the same time taking a step back. In this way, the hook flew directly towards Kista's own face. For a strong person like Kista, it was impossible for his own weapon to hit himself. He shook the whip in his hand slightly, and the hook suddenly stopped and was about to fly towards Yang Tian again. However, Yang Tian was waiting for this moment. He waved the saber in his hand and chopped at the hook. Then, he turned around and chopped at Kista's chest. At the same time, a red wind blade was emitted from the saber. In this case, it was almost impossible to avoid. Pung, the saber aura released by Yang Tian, collided with the energy shield released by Kista's armor. This attack did not cause any harm to Kista, and it did not even break the defense of the armor. After this attack, Yang Tian did not continue to attack, but immediately retreated. Because he saw that after Kista was hit by the saber aura, his movements were not the slightest bit messy. Sure enough, as Yang Tian expected, as soon as he retreated, Kista used the weapon in his hand to form a silver-white shield and covered him. If Yang Tian did not retreat, he would be covered by this strange shield. In this tenth of a second, the two of them made so many movements that far exceeded the speed of sound. In Qin Fei's eyes, the two of them were the same as before. After colliding, they quickly retreated. The second round ended just like that. After fighting for 2 rounds, Yang Tian basically understood Kista's strength and speed, and his confidence was greatly increased. As for the weapon in his hand, wasn't there a saying that one could defeat 10 with brute force? He was going to crush him directly with his powerful strength. In fact, until now, Yang Tian had not used all of his strength, which meant that he had not completely exploded. This was not Yang Tian being arrogant, because in the battle just now, he had already exerted more strength and speed than the average superstar warrior. After the two of them separated this time, they stopped again and looked at each other coldly. Although the crowd could not see the expressions on their faces, they knew that in the next round, the two of them would have a winner. The two of them were dozens of meters apart and stood still for about a minute before moving again. Kista shook the weapon in his hand, and the weapon that looked like a soft whip extended a few meters again, and then he waved it in the air. Driven by the energy in Kista's body, the weapon in his hand suddenly emitted a strong energy fluctuation, forming a fierce beast shadow in front of him. It was a 4-legged beast with the body of a tiger, the head of a bull, and a thick tail. And the tail end was in Kista's hand. The power of runes. As soon as they saw the appearance of this beast shadow, the priest's eyes widened, and a few of them could not help but cry out in surprise. This move did not harm the beast shadow. The beast shadow only had a psychological deterrent effect, and the terrifying thing was that under the beast shadow, the power of runes produced a strange attack method. Armor could use runes to enhance defense, so it was not strange to use runes on weapons to enhance attack. It was the first time Yang Tian had seen such a situation. As soon as the beast shadow appeared, his intuition told him that there was an extremely dangerous energy and attack method in the beast shadow. Even so, Yang Tian was not afraid, because he had already erupted with the most powerful energy he could use. In the entire original realm, all the energy that could be used by Yang Tian was transferred and poured into the red long saber in his hand. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The red long saber made a deafening buzzing sound, but it did not emit a strong energy fluctuation. In fact, 15 in Yang Tian's hand was also a weapon that made use of runes. No matter how much energy was poured into this weapon, it would not emit strong energy fluctuations. In fact, this was the most terrifying thing. Chapter 465. Go! Suddenly, Kista shouted, and the beast shadow that he had grabbed by the tail flew toward Yang Tian. At the same time, Yang Tian also held his sword with both hands and slashed toward the beast shadow. It was the most powerful attack he had ever used. The profound meaning of the snow cleaver saber art that Yang Tian had created and the profound meaning of the star slashing saber art that he had learned after killing the fiery wind behemoth in the Death Star zone had been integrated into this saber move. A thin, mirror-like red sword chi was emitted from Yang Tian's red sword. Boom! In an instant, the two forces collided with each other, causing a loud bang. Yang Tian and Kista's figures became blurry under the cover of the Talisman Formation's energy. This was because under the restraint of the Talisman Formation, the powerful collision caused the temperature of the air around them to rise rapidly, and the light became distorted. Even with the protection of the Talisman Formation, the ground around them still trembled. Seeing Yang Tian's figure disappear from the Talisman Formation, Qin Fei could not help but stand up. She was too worried about Yang Tian. At this time, the cultivators who were participating in the assessment opened their eyes wide, wanting to see the final result. At this time, not only them, but even the shamans who were watching the battle could not guess who had won and who had lost. Because in the Talisman Formation that protected this area, not only was the light distorted, but even the aura that came from it was also very messy. At this time, the calmest person was Hong Yujio. He only blinked his eyes and saw the result clearly. Under everyone's anticipation, the Talisman Formation quickly returned to normal. At this time, they could see that Yang Tian and Kista were still standing. But their situations were different. Yang Tian's body was intact, but Kista's helmet had been split in half and fell to the ground. Not only was the helmet cracked, but they could also see a red mark on Kista's forehead. Kista's weapon had also been broken into many pieces and was scattered on the ground. At this time, Yang Tian put down his sword, took off his helmet, and let out a long breath. If one looked carefully, they would see that Yang Tian's hands were trembling slightly. It seemed that the winner had been decided between the two. Yang Tian moved, but Kista did not. He was like a statue, and even the expression on his face was still in shock. After Yang Tian took off his helmet, he sat on the ground and kept shaking his hands. When everyone saw this strange scene, they could not guess what had happened. It was obvious that Kista had lost. Even the maids around Qin Fei could see it. At this moment, seeing that Yang Tian was fine, Qin Fei felt relieved and sat on her exquisite seat. After about 5 minutes, Kista finally moved. "Thank you." Unexpectedly, Kista's first words were to thank Yang Tian. Yang Tian waved his hand. "No need to thank me." With that said, Kista glanced at the surrounding priests and said indifferently, "I lost." After saying that, he turned around and returned to the side of the field. What happened just now? In fact, the process was very simple. Yang Tian's sword cut through the energy and weapon that Kista sent out. During this process, there was a strong collision of energy. But immediately after, Yang Tian withdrew his sword. Yang Tian grasped it very accurately, as if he had long known the result of this sword. If he did not forcefully withdraw his sword, Kista's body would have been cut in half by Yang Tian's sword. One had to know that Yang Tian's sword used origin power. The destructive power of origin power was very terrifying. If Kista's body was cut in half, with the destructive power of origin power, Kista would definitely not survive. And after Yang Tian withdrew his sword, only a small part of the origin power entered Kista's body. Kista was stunned there, looking stiff. He was resolving the origin power that entered his body. And the result of Yang Tian forcefully withdrawing his sword was that the muscle cells of his right arm were damaged, and it was incomparably sore and numb. Of course, Kista knew that Yang Tian let him go, so after recovering his ability to move, he thanked Yang Tian. The talisman array had already closed when Kista left. Yang Tian leaned on his sword and smiled at the more than 100 people participating in the assessment. Next, his appearance at this time was very arrogant in the eyes of the cultivators participating in the assessment. However, no one was willing to go forward. Even the strongest Kista was defeated. Wouldn't they lose face if they went up? Yang Tian had always been very low-key. If Qin Fei was not here, he would never do such a thing, using expression and words to provoke others. Of course, Yang Tian was not stupid. He knew that this level of provocation would make people unhappy, but they would not be so angry that they would throw caution to the wind. Seeing Yang Tian's mischievous appearance, Qin Fei could not help but smile. She had never seen Yang Tian so arrogant before. After a long while, no one accepted the challenge. Glorious Star Guna was about to announce Yang Tian's victory when Soli unexpectedly walked out. At this time, Soli looked at Yang Tian with a trace of resentment in her eyes. Because in her eyes, Yang Tian seemed to have become a different person. The reason, of course, it was because of the goddess not far away. At this time, Qin Fei also looked at Soli's face. With a woman's sharp intuition, she also sensed something. Although she had never met Soli before, Qin Fei knew her. Apart from Soli, Qin Fei also knew Chu Yin, Guing, and Seven Light Rain. Because these people had a good relationship with Yang Tian, the immeasurable Star Lord naturally had to investigate. Whether it was on Earth or in the entire universe, powerful men would always be favored by many women. Qin Fei naturally understood this, but she absolutely did not want Yang Tian to betray her, at least in terms of feelings. Soli stood more than 10 meters away from Yang Tian, took out her twin whips, and said indifferently, "Soli, star-level warlord." Yang Tian shrugged and said with a smile, "I admit defeat." After saying that, he turned around and walked towards Qin Fei. "Stop! Yang Tian, you're going the wrong direction." Glorious Star Guna did not want to stop Yang Tian from admitting defeat, but Yang Tian walking toward the goddess was not allowed. Therefore, he immediately shouted in a deep voice. Yang Tian stopped and looked at Qin Fei apologetically. Then, he turned around helplessly and said with a smile, "I'm sorry. I went in the wrong direction and fought just now. I'm still a little confused." Yang Tian's appearance made Qin Fei almost laugh out loud. Yang Tian was still the same as when he was in school. Sometimes he liked to play petty tricks. "I can't even get closer to my wife. What kind of world is this?" Yang Tian said in Mandarin, which no one except Qin Fei and the little blue dragon understood, and walked to the other side of the field. Yang Tian took the initiative to admit defeat, and everyone knew that he did it on purpose. However, no one could refute him. Yang Tian was willing to give up, and it was Yang Tian's business, wasn't it? After a short interlude, Soli shook the soft whip in her hand and said indifferently to the participating cultivators, "Please enlighten me." Chapter 466. Given Soli's current stellar warlord realm, it would be very difficult for her to win against any of the participating cultivators. Facing an opponent like Soli, a superstar boundary powerhouse would naturally be too ashamed to be the first to step forward. A few minutes later, a Nebula Domain Lord cultivator walked out. Ornan, Stellar Domain Lord. The person who came out reported his name and cultivation base. "I admit defeat." Soli spoke faintly in the face of a Stellar Zone Lord powerhouse before she walked out of the arena and came to Yang Tian's side. "Why did you give up?" Yang Tian asked with a smile when Soli walked to his side after giving up. Soli said, "There must be a procedure to determine the results of this kind of competition. It's not true that whoever is stronger will get first place. Otherwise, why would we need to come to the Superstar Divinity Temple to take the test?" "What did you see?" Yang Tian glanced at Qin Fei and asked gloomily. Yang Tian did not know why, but Qin Fei lowered her head and only cared about teasing the little blue dragon in her arms. She did not even look at him. The little blue dragon was even more detestable. It was obviously very smart, yet it had to pretend to be cute. Soli did not know that Yang Tian was multitasking. She glanced at Qin Fei and smiled faintly before saying, "Your combat strength is naturally the best. However, after I stepped out, you took the initiative to admit defeat. It's not that you are strong, but that you are willing to admit defeat in order to help me. This also means that if I encounter any trouble in the future, I will be able to ask you for help. In other words, I have a way to command a cultivator like you, who is much stronger than me." After Soli finished speaking, Yang Tian did not understand the logic of this kind of test. If there was a real explanation, it could only be described as popularity. This was also equivalent to what people often said: luck is also a part of strength. The following battles were no longer worth watching for the priests, because the most exciting battle had already ended. The following battles lasted for almost half a day. During this process, Yang Tian looked at Qin Fei from time to time. His heart was itching, but Qin Fei never looked at him. It seemed that he had offended Qin Fei for some reason. What is it? Yang Tian thought about it and finally understood that Qin Fei was probably jealous. But at this moment, he could only cry out in his heart. He didn't have such intentions towards Soli at all. "Those whose names have been called, you have been eliminated. Now, please follow me out of the temple," Glorious Star Guna announced loudly after receiving instructions from the priests. In the end, a total of 15 people remained, including Yang Tian and Soli. Seeing that she could stay, Soli was the happiest because her realm was the lowest among those who participated in the test. The people who had left were all star-grade cultivators. They had performed quite normally in the last 2 tests, and this was the decision of the Superstar God Temple priests. Although many people were dissatisfied, they didn't dare to complain. They obediently left with Glorious Star Guna. Next, there was another test. The content of the test was that the priests asked questions, and Yang Tian and the others answered. This was similar to the job fairs on Earth, where the examiners and the candidates would ask questions and answer questions. What are your names? How many women are there? Where are they from? What's your favorite food? How many runes can you remember? What are you happiest about? Many such questions were asked by one of the priests. Every cultivator who participated in the test was asked a different question. Yang Tian stood to the side. When the priest in charge of the questioning asked a cultivator, "What kind of position do you like to use when you do that with a woman?" Many people couldn't help but laugh. Many of the questions were personal, but they had to be answered. The rule was that if they refused to answer, they would be considered to have given up. There was no specific order in which the questions were asked. Yang Tian stood to the side and waited slowly. Yang Tian was the last to be questioned. "What's the name of the woman you like the most?" The priest in charge of the questioning asked Yang Tian with a serious expression. When Yang Tian saw the old man's serious expression, he wanted to laugh. Because not long ago, this old man had used this expression to ask a young cultivator what kind of position he liked. "Qin Fei," Yang Tian answered straightforwardly. Hearing Yang Tian's answer, Qin Fei finally raised her head and glanced at Yang Tian. Then, she lowered her head with a smile on her face. "This is the name of the goddess," the old priest said. Yang Tian said, "I know. Isn't it normal for me to like Lady Goddess?" The old priest didn't answer Yang Tian's question. Instead, he asked, "How many runes have you remembered?" This was a technical question. More than half of the people were asked this question. Yang Tian didn't even think and said with a smile, "I can remember all the runes I've seen." This was a very impressive answer. When the cultivators were asked this question, some said hundreds, some said thousands, or tens of thousands. But no one dared to say that they could remember all the runes they've seen. Yang Tian said very confidently, but the old priest didn't believe him. He said indifferently, "Please tell me the truth. You could give a rough number of runes you've remembered." If it wasn't for the strange program, Yang Tian wouldn't even remember a few hundred runes, let alone a few thousand. Yang Tian thought for a moment and scratched his head. "Countless." This answer was no different from his previous answer. "Okay." The old priest nodded. He raised his hand, and a thread-bound rune book appeared in his hand. After taking out the talisman book, the old shaman quickly said, "Flip through it once and look carefully. This old man will test you later." Yang Tian took the talisman from the old shaman and smiled. No problem. To the others, this was a very interesting thing. But at the same time, they were very surprised by Yang Tian's cultivation talent. Yang Tian was a student of the Superstar Academy. In other words, Yang Tian's age was at least less than 200 years. The age of life was judged differently on each planet. The Superstar Academy was built on Ketla planet, so it naturally took Ketla planet to revolve around the star for 1 year. If this was the case, Yang Tian's age was much younger. To reach the superstar realm at such a young age and have profound attainments in runes, the word genius couldn't be used to describe him. The most appropriate word was abnormal. Geniuses and freaks. These two words had similar meanings both on Earth and in the universe. The reason why it was abnormal was that it was widely acknowledged that one's realm was inversely proportional to one's achievement in runes, because these two types of cultivation required a lot of time. Chapter 467. Although the strange program was no longer in Yang Tian's brain, it could still read the information that was being transmitted from Yang Tian's brain at all times. Through this connection, the strange program could also obtain Yang Tian's visual information and enrich its rune database. The rune book only had about 30 pages, and each page only had about 200 runes. When Yang Tian was flipping through the rune book, he looked extremely serious. The people around him all opened their eyes wide and looked at him curiously. Even Qin Fei was the same. While he was flipping through, Yang Tian suddenly raised his head and glanced at Qin Fei. Seeing that Qin Fei was paying attention to him, he couldn't help but smile. He knew that Qin Fei wasn't really angry, but was just throwing a tantrum. The matter of memorizing these runes was done by the strange program. Yang Tian was only responsible for reading, so of course, he didn't need to use his brain cells. Can you concentrate a little? There are too many distracting thoughts in your head, and it's affecting me. The strange program's voice suddenly sounded in Yang Tian's mind. Yang Tian could only lower his head again and flip through the rune book page by page. After about 10 minutes, Yang Tian finished reading and returned the rune book to the old shaman. The strange program told Yang Tian that this rune book was an extremely rare rune book that recorded time energy. Among the runes that described energy, time runes were the most mysterious and precious. Ordinary people couldn't learn them even if they wanted to. Yang Tian didn't expect that this old shaman, who seemed to have an ordinary position in the Superstar Divine Temple, would give him a rune book about time. It could be seen that the resources the Superstar Divine Temple had were simply unimaginable. It wasn't without reason that this temple had existed since ancient times in the universe. Because in addition to talents, it also had material resources needed for cultivation, which were hard resources, and cultivation knowledge, which were soft resources. These two resources were the most abundant in the entire universe. After taking back the rune book, the old shaman asked faintly, "Are you done reading it?" Yang Tian nodded. "Yes." "Did you memorize it?" "Yes." "What rune is this?" "Time rune." Yang Tian's answer was very straightforward, and it seemed that he was very confident. When Yang Tian finally answered that it was a time rune, the old shaman's eyes flashed with surprise. Yang Tian really did know some runes. Among the 10 people who stayed behind, he was the one who understood runes the most. Time runes were relatively precious. Ordinary rune cultivators would start from the most basic runes that could use physical energy. Wind, fire, cold, these were energies that everyone could directly experience. Moreover, these runes were the easiest to learn. Later on, they could learn more advanced runes, such as illusions. Next, there were spatial runes, such as the commonly used teleportation arrays. After learning the space rune, he began to learn the time rune, and then the ultimate rune, which was the combination of time and space. In the universe, most of the rune cultivators were proficient in spatial runes, and that was already pretty good. Time runes, a rune was a rune on rune, as rune as for the ultimate runes. Apart from the rune saint who had disappeared a long time ago, no one knew what they looked like. That was because they didn't have a specific shape. The old shaman thought for a moment and said to Yang Tian, "Since you have memorized it, then write down the runes on the first and last pages." As he spoke, the old shaman took out a small rune pen and a piece of yellow paper specially used for writing runes. The old shaman's requirements were very clear. As long as Yang Tian wrote down the rune's shape, he didn't need to create any energy effects. This was easy. Yang Tian didn't need to do any preparation. Who didn't know how to copy? The strange program projected the contents of the 2 pages of rune paper in Yang Tian's mind. Yang Tian just had to copy it out. In front of each shaman's seat was an exquisite rectangular table. At this moment, these tables were just decorations to these shamans. Yang Tian held the pencil-like rune pen and spread the yellow paper on the table. He bent down and started writing. Among the people present, Qin Fei was the most astonished. In the sacred hall, the people and things Qin Fei came into contact with were all high and mighty. She naturally understood that it was extremely difficult for a cultivator to learn runes well. Even memorizing runes was an extremely difficult task, let alone learning them. When Qin Fei had nothing to do, she would flip through some rune books to pass the time. 2 years had passed, yet she had only memorized less than 10,000 runes. Furthermore, these runes were all extremely simple runes. Back on Earth, she had been a top student in school. However, when it came to learning runes, she still found it very strenuous. That was because runes weren't simple characters. Memorizing them was really difficult. Of course, compared to ordinary cultivators, Qin Fei's innate talent in runes was considered outstanding. Could Yang Tian do it? Was this fellow joking again? Qin Fei couldn't believe her eyes when she saw Yang Tian's serious expression as he wrote. Yang Tian's writing speed was extremely fast, as everyone looked on curiously. It didn't even take him 5 minutes to finish writing. This kind of rune pen didn't use color to display the runes. Instead, it used shallow marks on a yellow paper. Yang Tian had carved the first few runes either too deep or too shallow. However, toward the end, the depth was just right. Since Yang Tian understood the profound meaning of the snow cleave technique and the strange program was controlling his body, Yang Tian had memorized the technique of applying force while he was carving the runes. The runes he had written were just like a copy of the runes in a book. When he saw that Yang Tian had finished writing, the old shaman quickly picked up the yellow paper and read it carefully. Perhaps he hadn't been able to memorize all the runes on the rune book. The old shaman once again took out the precious rune book that recorded time from his storage bracelet. After flipping open the book, the old shaman started to compare the runes one by one. The reason runes were difficult to learn was because many of the runes were very similar. If there were more runes or slight differences in the radian, the energy they represented would be different. For example, the Chinese characters for de, tai, quan. These differences were still very obvious, but what if there were hundreds or thousands of them? It was really too difficult to remember. After about 10 minutes, the old shaman finally finished comparing the runes. He lifted his head and told Yang Tian, "You have answered the question correctly." He had gone through so many complicated processes just to answer one question from Yang Tian. After more than half an hour, Yang Tian had only answered 2 questions. If you become a divine general of the Superstar Divine Hall, will you sacrifice your life for the benefit of the Superstar Divine Hall? Then the old shaman asked a question that was very difficult to answer. Chapter 468. If you become a divine general of the Superstar Divine Temple, will you give up your life for the temple's benefit? Facing this question, many people might not even think about it before answering yes. But they all knew that it was too fake. Even these priests would probably choose their own lives over the Superstar Divine Temple's benefits. Yang Tian thought about it and smiled. My answer now is that I will definitely protect my own life. However, if the Superstar Divine Temple's benefits and my benefits are completely the same, I might put my life on the line for the Superstar Divine Temple's benefits. The old priest didn't say anything in response to Yang Tian's answer. Following that, he asked many more personal questions. Yang Tian, answer them one by one. Yang Tian was the last one. After he answered these questions, this alternative test was finally completed. Yang Tian and the others were called outside, and dozens of priests gathered together to discuss. Because of the talisman formation, Yang Tian and the others couldn't hear what the priests were saying. About half an hour later, the priests dispersed and the talisman formation closed again. During this entire process, Qin Fei, as the goddess, had also stayed outside. Naturally, she did not know the result. Therefore, when the priests finished discussing, she was a little nervous. Hong Yujio didn't express his opinion about the priest discussion. This kind of matter of selecting a divine general was just a trivial matter to him. Yang Tian wasn't interested in the divine general position at all. He only hoped to have a chance to leave with Qin Fei. Of course, before leaving, he had to find Earth's interstellar coordinates. When he was at the Superstar Academy, Yang Tian learned the number of the storage box in the Superstar Divine Temple from Principal Xing Yi. Now, all he had to do was find that storage box. Other than that, he also had to meet High Priest Kaya and find out where the Dragon Starfield was from him. Many cultivators knew about strange beasts like dragons, but they didn't know where they came from. This was a very strange thing. After the priests finished discussing, other than the old priest who was in charge of asking Yang Tian and the others, Brilliant Star Guna, everyone else left. When these priests left, they all bowed to Goddess Qin Fei and Hong Yujio. In the end, only Yang Tian and the others remained, together with the old priest, a divine general Brilliance Star Guna. There was also Qin Fei and her group of maids. Goddess Qin Fei didn't want to leave and wanted to know the result, so High Priest Hong Yujio naturally stayed as well. Yang Tian, So Li, Kista, Vast Universe Moyen, and Black Star. The 5 of you stay, the rest can leave. Brilliant Star Guna quickly walked over and announced with a smile on his face under the anticipation of Yang Tian and the rest of the group. Obviously, the Temple Divine General position, the Divine General Temple, and the rest of the 10 people were eliminated. Among those who were eliminated, there was a superstar cultivator. When Brilliant Star Guna Divine General announced the result, the cultivator called Parson was not convinced. He gritted his teeth and said, "I am a superstar realm. Why are you keeping a star-level warlord woman and not me?" When he said that, Soli frowned. This person clearly looked down on women. Brilliance Star Guna smiled and said, "This is the Temple Divine General's choice. You have no right to object." Oof. After Brilliant Star Guna Divine General said that, Parson snorted coldly and said with a cold smile, "Superstar Divinity Temple, one day, boom." Before Parson could finish, Brilliant Star Guna attacked. In a flash, he appeared in front of Parson and smashed Parson's head into pieces. Brilliant Star Guna was too fast and too sudden. Even Yang Tian couldn't see his movements clearly. After his body was smashed, Parson's body fell to the ground. The flesh on his head wriggled, and his head quickly grew back. Brilliant Star Guna reached out and grabbed Parson's neck. This is why the Temple Divine General didn't want you. You're not calm at all, and you don't know what's good for you. Do you think the priests are interested in your private life? No matter how you answer the questions they ask, they will be able to see your true nature clearly. After Brilliant Star Guna said that, he threw Parson more than 10 meters away. A Superstar Guna had been dealt with in one move by Brilliant Star Guna. Parson hadn't been able to resist at all. This immediately intimidated the other 9 eliminated cultivators. After Parson got up from the ground in horror, he didn't dare say anything else. Instead, he left with the other 9 cultivators. Brilliant Star Guna was right. Parson had used his actions to prove that he was an impulsive person who didn't know how to adapt. Although such a person had a high cultivation base, he was useless to the Temple Divine General. Besides Soli, there was another cultivator called Black Star, who was also a Stargrade Martialist. Brilliant Star Guna looked at Yang Tian and the other 5 people and said with a smile, "Congratulations to all of you. You have become a Divine General of the Superstar Divine Temple." In fact, during the assessment process, the Temple Divine General didn't just look at your cultivation base. It also looked at your potential. The five of you are at least the five people with the most potential in the past 100 years of the Superstar Academy. Brilliant Star Guna paused for a moment, turned his head, and glanced at the old priest who had already walked over. Then, he said, "Among the five of you, the chief divine general is Kista." After announcing this result, Brilliant Star Guna looked at Yang Tian. Although Yang Tian also hoped that he could become the chief divine general, he wasn't disappointed by this result. He didn't know why, but he was actually relieved. As long as he became a divine general of the Superstar Divine Temple, he would have the opportunity to stay in the Temple Divine General and meet Qin Fei frequently. Yang Tian only frowned for a moment before he smiled. This matter wasn't over yet. Sure enough, Yang Tian. Brilliant Star Guna suddenly called out Yang Tian's name. "Yes," Yang Tian responded. Brilliant Star Guna said, "In view of your talent in runes, although you are unyielding, the Temple Divine General will make an exception and promote you to the Chief Divine General." "Oh, thank you very much." Yang Tian was stunned for a moment before he smiled and said. The old priest walked over and said to Yang Tian, "Yang Tian, come with this old man." After that, the old priest turned around and bowed to Qin Fei and Hong Yujio. He glanced at Yang Tian again before he flashed and went to the stone steps that Yang Tian and the others came from. When Yang Tian was about to leave, the little blue dragon, who was lying in Qin Fei's arms, suddenly opened its eyes wide. It scratched Qin Fei's hand with its claws and flew to Yang Tian's shoulder. Yang Tian and Qin Fei blinked their eyes, smiled, and immediately followed the old priest. Yang Tian faintly felt that perhaps because of the runes, he would be meeting an important person soon. Yang Tian purposely showed off his ability in runes. This was because the Superstar Divine Temple valued cultivators who were talented in certain aspects. Chapter 469. The old shaman's figure flickered up and down the stone steps. This old man was very fast, and Yang Tian had to use all his strength to keep up. The two figures seemed to teleport as they flashed up the stone steps. Every time they appeared, they would cross dozens of steps. After a few minutes, they finally arrived at their destination. The old shaman brought Yang Tian to the entrance of the Great Space Palace. The Great Space Palace was the second tallest palace in the entire temple complex. There were 8 other palaces on the same level as this one. Standing at the entrance of this palace, one could see the Goddess Palace at the highest point, as well as the observatory and other buildings. This was the place where Great Shaman Taiyu lived and cultivated in the temple. In the Superstar Divine Temple, the most famous person in the field of runes was Great Shaman Taiyu. Moreover, the 3 words Great Space Palace were carved on a stone tablet at the entrance of the Great Space Palace using runes. Runes were actually words, and a special kind of words. Compared to the other palaces, this place was very quiet. There was almost no noise, and there were no temple guards. This was related to the personality of rune cultivators. Any cultivator who was proficient in runes liked peace and quiet. The old shaman stopped at the entrance of the palace and bowed towards the entrance. "Great shaman, I have brought him." After saying this, the old shaman straightened his body and pointed towards the entrance. His meaning was clear. He wanted Yang Tian to go in. Looking in from outside, it was very bright, but nothing could be seen. It was as if there was a ball of white light inside. "Thank you." Yang Tian looked inside and thanked the old shaman before walking inside. The little blue dragon, who was lying on Yang Tian's shoulder, opened its eyes wide and vigilantly looked at the situation behind the door. This was because there was a strange energy fluctuation coming from the white light. This energy was clearly produced by a rune array. Was this a test? Yang Tian walked through the door with a smile on his face. The inside and outside of the door were like 2 different worlds. After going through the door, there was nothing but a vast expanse of white. There wasn't even any air. However, there was no energy that was harmful to the body. After Yang Tian took one step in, he stopped. He scanned his surroundings and immediately took a step back. Logically speaking, Yang Tian had only taken one step when he entered the door. If he took a step back, he would be able to step out of the door. However, after this step, he still remained in the vast white space. He could only see about 10 meters ahead of him. They weren't in a fog-like environment. At the same time, there was plenty of light, but they couldn't see very far. It gave off a very contradictory feeling. This was the result of spatial runes. It was very mysterious. A single step Yang Tian took here could be 1,000 steps, or 1,000 steps, or only a single step. There were all sorts of transformations, and they were extremely wondrous. A single spatial rune array could trap a cultivator to death within it. If time runes were added to it, it would be even more powerful. Rune arrays were also divided into different grades. For example, the maze set up by Flying Cloud High Priest Yang Tian had encountered last time was very simple, because Flying Cloud High Priest did not wish to trap anyone inside. Yang Tian relied on the strange program and quickly found an exit. Not long after, a lucky person managed to break out of the place by randomly charging in. Compared to that kind of rune array, the one in the Great Universe Palace was 10 times more exquisite. Faced with such a situation, Yang Tian didn't move around casually. Instead, he sat down. Just now, the strange program had reminded Yang Tian that this rune array was only a spatial rune array and didn't have time energy. The strange program had to be stored in Yang Tian's brain again to crack this rune array. The old priest sent Yang Tian to the entrance of the Great Universe Palace. After seeing Yang Tian enter, he didn't leave. Instead, he sat cross-legged at the entrance and began to wait. Great Priest Great Universe was one of the oldest priests in the Superstar Divinity Temple. He didn't have much time left. However, after such a long time, he still hadn't found a successor. The old shaman that brought Yang Tian here was the disciple of High Shaman Taiyu in human terms. The old priest wasn't the only disciple like this. These people had been working hard for so many years to find a successor for Great Priest Great Universe. This wasn't just related to Great Priest Great Universe's inheritance, but also related to the temple's interests. Yang Tian's talent in runes was outstanding. No, it should be said that it was astonishing. This was why the old priest had brought Yang Tian here to accept Great Priest Great Universe's test. If he passed, one could imagine how bright Yang Tian's future would be. After receiving Great Priest Taiyu's inheritance, it was only a matter of time before Yang Tian became a great priest of the temple. The old priest had complicated feelings as he looked at the vast expanse of whiteness before the palace's entrance. This was because he had accepted this test countless times, but the results were always the same. He couldn't use runes to leave that space. It wasn't just him. Others were the same. Would Yang Tian be able to do it? The old priest was looking forward to it, worried and jealous at the same time. This was because Yang Tian was too young. Sometimes, youth was a kind of capital. After Yang Tian left with the old priest, Soli and the other three were brought to the lowest level of the Superstar Divine Temple by Yao Guna to wait for the higher-ups arrangements. Qin Fei returned to the goddess palace, escorted by Larry and the other 18 white-robed maids. Qin Fei originally wanted to ask Great Priest Hong Yuzhou where Yang Tian had been taken, but she didn't know how to ask. She was afraid that Hong Yuzhou would cause trouble for Yang Tian. After all, Hong Yuzhou was well aware of her relationship with Yang Tian. After returning to the goddess palace, Qin Fei's closest white-robed maid, Larry, was quickly sent out to gather information. While Qin Fei was waiting anxiously, Larry finally returned. Where was Yang Tian taken to? Qin Fei asked anxiously the moment Larry returned, and before he could say anything, Larry had already returned. If she knew who the old priest was, she would naturally know where Yang Tian had been taken. However, there were many people in the huge Superstar Divine Temple. Qin Fei couldn't remember everyone's name. The information Larry had gathered wasn't top secret. When Qin Fei asked, Larry smiled and said, "Goddess, don't worry. Yang Tian was taken to the Great Universe Palace." Qin Fei naturally knew about the Great Universe Palace. She thought about it and understood. Having been in the superstar divine temple for so long, she had heard many things about the temple from the maid's conversations. For example, which divine generals were punished for fighting, which great priests liked to eat, which great priests destroyed their palaces while cultivating, and so on. These were all trivial matters in the temple. The bored maids could only pay attention to these things. The Great Universe Palace's test had been talked about by the maids many times. Therefore, when she learned that Yang Tian had been brought to the Great Universe Palace, that Yang Tian had displayed his talent in the Tao of Runes in front of the old high priest, and that people were often brought to the Great Universe Palace to be tested, Qin Fei naturally guessed that Yang Tian had gone to be tested. Chapter 470. When Yang Tian was taking the test, Great Priest Tai Yu wasn't actually in the Tai Yu Palace. There were a total of 36 great priests gathered in the Maze Palace where Great Priest Yu Chun was. These 36 were the most senior members of the Superstar Divinity Temple. Even a new great shaman, like Hong Yujiu, wasn't qualified to participate in the research of the 36 of them. Great Priest Kaya, Great Priest Tai Yu, Great Priest Guan Yu, Great Priest Yu Chun. These people were all very proficient in certain aspects. Kaya had traveled the universe for a very long time and was very knowledgeable. He had a unique understanding of everything in the universe. Great Priest Tai Yu was proficient in runes. Great Priest Guan Yu and Great Priest Yu Chun were prophets of the temple. In fact, they were proficient in using known information and time runes to calculate future outcomes. There was also Great Priest Mei Chun, who had great mental power and came from the music realm star field. He could see through the essence of cultivators at a glance. Great Priest Empty God cultivated 3 types of energy at the same time. He was a genius in cultivation and the #1 expert of the Superstar Divinity Temple. These 36 people had been gathered together for a very long time. The object of their research was the mysterious youth headless corpse that Yang Tian had brought back. The Superstar Divinity Temple had existed for a very long time. It was so long ago that even the great priests of the temple no longer believed the temple's claims about the universe. These 36 people were all extremely talented people. At the same time, they were also the oldest. It wouldn't be long before they died one by one. That was because their lifespans were reaching the end. Long, long ago, everyone knew that the higher one's cultivation was, the longer one could live. However, realms were limited for the humans in this universe. The publicly recognized peak cultivation was the Great Star God. Great Star Gods had very long lifespans. They could live for at least 300,000 years. 300,000 years was a very long time. For ordinary humans, this was simply unimaginable. Perhaps they felt that it was enough for them to live for thousands or even tens of thousands of years. However, for these experts who had lived for close to 300,000 years, or had lived for more than 300,000 years, time was still too short. If they couldn't break through to the Great Star God realm, what awaited them would be forever disappearing from the universe. However, this mysterious corpse gave them hope. 36 high priests gathered here and studied it for a long time, but none of them made any progress. Their method of experimentation was to first extract some of the powerful cells from the corpses and implant them into human bodies. Ordinary humans couldn't do it. They possessed great strength for a short period of time, but soon after, with a pung sound, they exploded, leaving behind a pile of rotten flesh. After several experiments, the results were the same. Next up were the cultivators. Meteor state, planetary state, star state, and even superstate cultivators were captured and used for experiments. As a result, the bodies of these cultivators exploded just like those of ordinary humans. The only difference was the time of destruction and the power of the explosion. As for the great star lords above the superstar state, the great priest had already experimented on his own body, which proved to be a failure. Through his mental power, Mei Chun penetrated deep into the flying cloud grand priest cell nucleus and understood the entire process of the changes clearly. These experiments proved that the human body could not withstand such cellular changes. In that case, he would experiment with other types of creatures. Exotic beasts, beastmen, insectoids, countless organic life forms have been experimented on, but there were still no results. Of course, the failures of these experiments didn't make the great priests give up. They began to experiment, using technology and all kinds of energy to stimulate the powerful cells of the body. At this moment, the great priest Yu Chen's maze palace was more like a scientific laboratory. In this spacious space, there were countless scientific instruments, runic instruments, and all kinds of tools to store energy. These great priests usually looked down on scientific instruments, but now they had to use them. As for the use of the instruments, they were all operated by intelligent programs. One sentence could make them work. The operation was even more precise than manual labor. Each of the 36 great priests had a detailed division of labor. Great priest Kaya was responsible for making suggestions and observing the results of various experiments. Great priest Mei Chun was responsible for observing microscopic changes and providing detailed observation data. Great priest Tai Yu was responsible for using runes to set up a rune array to prevent energy from leaking out. Great priest Guan Yu and Great priest Yu Chun were responsible for calculating the future according to the changes in various data. Every once in a while, the 36 great priests would sit together and have a discussion. They would also take care of the matters outside while they were at it. The Superstar Divinity Temple had a lot of work to do, from small things like the reward for each divine general to big things like conquering a star field. During this process, Great Priest Guan Yu and Great Priest Yu Chun would also make some calculations. Both of them had half a time rune tool in their hands. When they worked together, they could see some vague scenes of the future. The past couldn't be changed, but the future could be changed by the present. This was also in line with the theory of karma. Yang Tian has entered my great universe palace and is undergoing an examination, Great Priest Tai Yu said indifferently. The 36 great priests present all had very old faces. Their hair was like withered grass. Judging by the age of Earth, each of them looked like an old man in his 70s or 80s. Great Priest Tai Yu had neatly combed long white hair. He was one of the youngest of the 36 great priests, around 70 years old. He wore a black robe that was similar to the one worn by Great Priest Fei Yun, but it was newer. The black robe was also embroidered with runes. Under such circumstances, the reason Yang Tian was mentioned was because the two prophets, Great Priest Guan Yu and Great Priest Yu Chun, had calculated the name Yang Tian a long time ago. All of this seemed to be related to Yang Tian. When Yang Tian was mentioned, Great Priest Guan Yu said something happened in the first round of the examination and the results changed. After Great Priest Guan Yu said this, Great Priest Yu Chen added, "That's why I decided to let him stay." Great Priest Tai Yu smiled. "It's better not to calculate now. It might change later. Let's wait until it's decided." After Great Priest Tai Yu said this, a female Great Priest said, "Will it affect the Lady Goddess?" When this female Great Priest mentioned the Lady Goddess, Great Priest Guan Yu and Great Priest Yu Chen's expressions turned ugly. If Yang Tian and the Lady Goddess were to be calculated together, it would cause them great harm. During the last calculation, Great Priest Guan Yu had vomited blood and his lifespan had decreased by at least 100 years. It was obvious that someone even more powerful had used some method to prevent them from calculating. This was too frightening. This also indirectly proved that there were cultivators even more powerful than the great star god in this universe. Perhaps it was that group of people from back then. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.